Okay, welcome to another edition of the Edlow podcast. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. And today I have, this is going to be perhaps a cool history lesson in the history of Sacramento wrestling because I've got one of the OGs here. I have Big Ugly JD Bishop. It's a pleasure to have you on here, man.
Oh, it's great to be here, man. Thanks. I'm a big fan of the show, and thanks for finally having me on.
Yeah, man. It's crazy to think. It's. I was talking to Flacco about this. It's so cool to see. I mean, when we started around here, I mean, I was around the scene. I've been around the scene since the beginning, and so have you. Um, it's cool to see how the independent wrestling scene has flourished and is finally kind of caught on here in Northern California.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when we first started, it was kind of you had the companies in the Bay Area, and that was about it. And then
Mm,
trying to get into those companies was almost impossible.
right.
So when it started here, it was basically SPW, and then
Mhm.
once in a while somebody would throw a show for whatever reason was, and then
Yeah.
just over time, man, it started booming. It started
Yeah.
getting really big. And now there's like 4 or 5 companies just within Sacramento.
Yeah. Well, and what I think is so cool about that though is that back in the day, I mean, even like when I was running SWF in the 2008, 2012, a lot of places were just excited to get 100 people to show up. You know
Oh
what I
yeah.
mean? And like now, it is not out of the it's not uncommon to see three, four, 500 people at a show. Even and there are some that are even drawn in the thousands. And I just think that that's such a we I don't think we could have imagined that back in 2008 when I started as SWF, and I know SPW had been around for a long time, and so just cool to see how it's flourished and see a bunch of guys who it used to be that this was like I remember Joe Applebomber, big I can't remember what he calls himself now,
Pogo.
but
Oh,
Pogo,
Coach
right?
Nerd? Yeah.
Yeah, Coach Nugs, Coach Joey. Here, I remember him saying that this place was a ghost town. Nobody ever gets seen here, and now there's lots of people getting looks, including your son.
Yeah, yeah. It's when we first started, like we were kind of not to use foul language, but the bastard stepchild of pro wrestling around here.
Yeah,
Like people just didn't want nothing to do with our area. It was all about the Bay Area and APW and BTW, and those were the big dogs. Those are the ones bringing in the Japanese guys and all the indie guys. Basically, everybody you see on the end or WWE now and AEW, AJ Styles and all them were doing like the King of Indies and stuff. When we started, like I had a little bit of heat with the owner of APW, Roland. So we were kind of like blackballed. Like I couldn't use any of those guys, so I kind of had to make my own stars and my own build up my own roster of people. And basically, we just after we formed, and then in Stockton, they were running a company there, and then we worked with PCW a little bit, and we kind of started branching off to other things. The Brawl opened up in Antioch, and we were kind of affiliated with everybody. And then we just started booming, and guys started getting work and going all over the country. But yeah, in the beginning, man, it was really, really rough just to draw numbers. And at the time, SPW, Rich Roby was the promoter and the owner when I came aboard, and I know you were friends with him as well. And Rich, he comes from a hip hop background, not a wrestling background. So me and him working together was rough at first. We were good friends, but his idea of promoting was just way different than mine. And some nights we would draw well, some nights we were, a little light at the door, So
yeah,
I had
yeah,
to use a lot of my students, and I got rid of a lot of the guys who were there before me. And we just started doing basically to separate ourselves from everybody else. We started doing a lot of death matches and hardcores and stuff like that. And I think that really, although it hurt us in the end, it really helped us in the beginning.
yeah. Well, let me back up a little bit, and I want to kind of go over this chronologically because I got to tell you, it's interesting. And we'll get into the beginnings of SPW quite a bit because I have my own perception of that, and you do too. And we were all there at the beginning, and then I left. I was gone for 2 years, and I came back, and Rich was gone, and you were running things, and I saw that like it became a hardcore place. And a lot of the guys, I mean, in the 2 years, and I think this is just natural from wrestling, but a lot of the guys that were there at the beginning, even some of your students, like I remember Baby Ray and Mike Daniel and Wicked and Jesus and all those guys, but a lot of them by the time I'd come back had already gone,
Yeah.
and it was like a whole new crew. But before we get into that, what tell me where the heat came from with APW and Roland.
When I was training with APW, I was at this point I was working in Nevada at a boys ranch, so I'd
Mm,
go up there for a week and then come back for a week. That was my schedule. I'd be in Nevada on the site at the boys ranch for a week, Wednesday to Wednesday, and then come home. The APW school was for beginners was Wednesdays and Sundays. So what I would do is I had built up enough time, so it was out there in Shores, Nevada, which is 5 hours from Sacramento. I would go in late on Wednesday, use some holiday pay, go train, and drive all the way to Shores, Nevada to work until Sunday, take the day off, drive all the way back to Hayward to train, and then drive all the way back to work to finish my week, my shift out. And so there was a couple of times where like my car broke down and just small things where I couldn't make it that day. So I came to open gym and, yeah, you try to make it up. Roland didn't like that, of course, because he said I'm not dedicated. And I was fine with it, whatever. I'm still going to continue to go. And as I progressed down towards the second beginner's camp that he made me go through, I slipped a disc in my back. And I told him, look, dude, like I need to take 2 weeks off. This was right before we did heat night. We did everything. I was like, I need to take 2 weeks off. I can't bump. My doctor won't let me. And he's like, oh, no problem, no problem. After those 2 weeks happen, he recycles me again for a third beginner's camp. And I'm like, dude, like if you would have just told me, I would have just sucked it up for the 2 weeks and just went to deal with the pain. And he made me go through beginners again. And then the third time it was beginners camp and then one semi-pro camp. After that, he basically was putting other people on the shows and stuff, and I was just training us, setting up the ring and doing all the stuff beginners do, while other guys who weren't there as long were doing stuff on the shows already. And I was just like, dude, I can't deal with this anymore. This is, and even Mike Modest was telling me, dude, you need to get the fuck out of here. Like, because you need to leave. He's like, for some reason, Roland doesn't like you. And I was just like, well, what do I do? And he's like, just go find somewhere else to train. So at that point, I just looked around the internet and found NAW in Fresno, but ran by Brian Ward, and went and started training up there. And within 2 months, I was doing shows, because I
mm,
already had a good foundation. But for some reason, Roland just didn't like me. And then after I had left, of course, he was putting out there that I'm a backyarder, I'm untrained, and then he was on the flip side trying to sue me for breach of contract because I went and trained somewhere else. So
mm,
when we finally had getting ready to go to court because he was trying to sue me, the attorney I had just printed out all the things he posted about me on the message board, and then the lawsuit saying that I'm trained, that I was trained there, but he's saying that I'm not trained. So there was kind of like a defamation of character. So he just decided
mm,
to drop everything and then just try to blackball me and did
mm,
whatever he could to shut down my shows and not let his guys work for me, and just any chance he could just bash me because I was kind of proving him wrong that you could make it by not going to APW. You could still make it in the
mm,
business because when you were there, and I'm sure many of the guys who went will tell you, like, you bought in. I mean, you drank the Kool-Aid. It was like
yeah,
this is the only place that you can make it here. And at this point,
right,
Modest was on WCW, so we're all thinking, holy shit, we're going to be, stars, because we're drinking the Kool-Aid,
yeah,
and when you go out and you find out that, you're out of that bubble, that there is other ways to do it, other ways to go about it. He didn't like that because I was really proving him wrong, and he just tried to do whatever he could to shut me down. And I
mm,
didn't really, fire back because we were flourishing at SPW, so
yeah,
every time he's bashing me, people are piquing more interest. So I was like, go ahead, keep bashing me, like,
yeah,
and he and it in some part, when we started doing the deathmatch stuff, it really pissed him off because we were
yeah,
drawing good numbers. So I kept doing it because that's just my mentality. So I had guys like me and Dante and Handsome Jack and Clint Douglas, and these guys were in Legend, and these guys, we were just doing all this crazy deathmatch stuff, and we just fell in love with it. We loved doing it, and it really just helped us. But from that point on until like right before he passed, he just had heat with me,
mm.
and I think a lot of it was just business, but whatever. I mean, I was doing fine. I was living my dream. I ran a company, I ran a school, and I was happy.
Right. It's interesting you bring that up because I got to tell you. So I remember the first SPW show. Well, before we go into that, let me ask you, how did you get a hold of Rich Roby?
The funny thing, when we were training, me and my buddy, started training at NAW, and we did one show up in at some casino up in Fresno somewhere. I'm sure one of the guys, Dante, didn't remember, but it was some show up there. And it's funny because I actually ran into a lot of the APW guys there. That's a whole other
Mm,
story though. But after we had done that show, the next weekend there was a taping of WCW at the old Arco Arena, and we took our
Mhm.
wives to go because we were just we had just graduated and we were fans of wrestling still, so we took them, and he came up and handed us a flyer in the parking lot. And we looked at it. We
Mhm.
were like, "Hey, we just finished training. Like, we just got done with our training. We would like, what's it gonna take to get us on your card?" And he's like, "Oh my God, you guys are from Sacramento, blah blah." And he's like, "Hey, give me a call. I'll get you guys booked." So we called him, and he's like, "Yeah, come on down to the show next weekend. We'll get you guys booked." And he's like, "Everything will be great." And I was like, "All right, cool." So we show up, and I remember it was the day before my birthday. It was April 24th, and Roland's there, and Vinny was there, Boyce
Yeah.
Legrand was there, Vinny, what's his name, Billy Valentino or something like that, and a
Yeah.
couple other guys were there. And Roland told him, "If Gabe's on your show, we're leaving. That we won't do the show if Gabe's here." So Rich came up to me. He's like, "Look, man, I have to have these guys on the show. I have nobody else, and if you just have faith in me, I'll get rid of them and I'll bring you guys back next month." So, and part of me is like, yeah, whatever, dude. No big deal. But then I kind of think like, oh, I'll play the game. I have nothing else going on.
Let me
And
ask you a question on that. Let me ask you a question on that real quick because I remember. So I was there for I can't remember how many shows I was there for, but this is not the one that Schizo ran. This is the actual SPW show, right? This
yeah,
is the one where Cooley was the booker, right?
I came in the first show I did for SPW. Cooley was booking. Schizo had just left, so Jim
Yeah,
took over the booking, and I think it was like two shows where Cooley was booking, and
yeah,
then he was gone.
yeah.
But it was
So
right then. It was right because Cooley was working with APW a little bit,
yeah,
and so he had brought those guys in, and that was kind of the downfall with him and Rich.
right. So the show because I remember I was on 3 or 4 of the first shows and so I'm trying to remember the first show with the. I remember the show that the like Jardy France was on it, Boyce Legrand was on it.
Yeah,
They had a couple other guys on there as well. Uh, but I thought you were on that. Maybe you weren't on that show. You were on the one where we were coming in. That reminds me. So the first one, you weren't on that one, but you were on the next one. Because here's what I remember about you. This is the first time I met you. I brought the ring up to. I brought the ring from the Stockton guys
mm,
up to my house. I was a backyarder. They were all backyarders too, and we all came
yeah,
together and we did a backyard show, and then we took the ring to the Colonial for the SPW show the next night. We were all on that show too.
yeah,
That probably fueled Roland's fire why you guys were all backyarders because you had a
yeah,
bunch of backyarders on the show, and so but the thing was that I remember your match. You Kid Looney, right? You were
yeah,
Kid Looney that first
yeah,
match. And I remember because, we had guys like Hustler on there and Warpath and all these guys who looked big wrestlers. But when you guys went out there, um, it was clear to me as someone watching the matches, you guys were on another level. You know what I mean? Like I saw you guys. I could the fact that was your first match, right?
yeah. That was my first match. Yeah,
And like that, the fact that was your first match, it got the biggest reaction on the card.
yeah,
And then we had Professor Poindexter and Dante, and and that one had a good one too. And then that was the whole issue with Cooley and Dante, which I find hilarious at this point. But
yeah, yeah,
that whole story where. So for people who are listening, I'll just share the story from my perspective. You can add in. What I found really funny was so Cooley, for whatever reason, he obviously had a problem with you guys coming in because he was buddies with the APW guys and he was buddy with the posse, 8 Ball Posse. So he was kind of bummed that you guys were coming in, and so he gave you guys your time, but then he cut like 2 minutes in. He called to go home for Dante,
yeah,
and Dante just didn't listen. And they
yeah,
did their match, and so he came back and he wanted to kick every. Dante told Cooley where he could go,
yeah,
and he tried to kick him out, and then he tried to kick you out, and you're like, "I'm not going anywhere." And that was
yeah.
that was that was the end of that for you. What happened after that? Like, what did you guys say when Dante left? What
Well,
was you guys?
like for me, it was never like about Cooley because I was I'm under the same mentality. Like if I'm the booker, I say go home. You better go the fuck home.
Right?
But Dante's my boy. We trained together, and he's like my brother. So of course I'm going to have his back. And what
Sure.
happened? He got fucked over. Like they just. I think they fucked him over just because they thought there would be no response. He was just a new kid, skinny little redhead, fucking ginger.
Mm,
He's not going to do nothing. But that ain't
right.
Dante. Dante's fucking crazy. Like, he's one of the craziest guys I've met in the business. Like, legitimately, like,
Yeah.
it's not the first time like I would have had to pull him off somebody. He's fucking. He just the shit's not wired right. I love the guy to death. But he's not afraid to throw the first punch. To put it that way. So I was, of course, siding with him, but I was just like, "You're not gonna kick me out, dude." Like, Rich booked me. Rich is the fucking
Right.
owner. I was just like,
Yeah.
and I was good at this point. I became good friends with Coach Nugs, and I was just like, this is you're mad at him, and he's my friend. You're taking it out on me. Like, what the fuck? Like, so
Yeah.
that's when I guess him and Rich started having some problems,
Yeah.
and I was just like, dude, this is ridiculous. But this place is legitimately 10 minutes from my house, so I don't want to leave.
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was what I like me sitting there watching because I was just excited that there was a pro place where we could really, because I trained with Oliver John, for
Yeah.
2 months, and then I was getting bookings, little places here and there, but the bookings that I was getting, it was just because I was huge, and I also had all the TV. You know what I mean? Like all the news
Yeah.
people because of my backyard stuff. So I was out there working and doing things, but yeah, I was just excited. I was like, oh, finally, a place where we could actually do something,
Yeah.
And I think the Stockton guys were of the same ilk. Like when I talked to Baby Ray and Mike Daniels and Jesus and all those guys, like we were all just like finally a place where we could really train. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And and then I left. So maybe you can tell me, educate me on how the transition away from Rich came to you being the booker. Because I left and Rich was like, "We'll be here when you get back. Everything will be the same." And then I came back and Rich was gone and he had passed away.
Yeah.
And you had you started running it. So maybe you can tell me kind of how that transition occurred.
But when I first got asked to book, I think it was right after him and Jim had a falling out, and he
Mm,
had nobody else
mm,
to do anything, and he knew if he was going to hire you know, probably like Bill Big Money or one of those guys, they were going to fire all of us.
mm,
Because it was the old guard didn't like the new guard didn't like the old. That's just the way wrestling works. So I think
mm,
he was just like, he asked me, he's like, hey, you're kind of in the middle of both of them. The older guys like you, the young kids respect you. You want to try booking? And I'm like, not really. I don't know how to fucking book. I'm greener than shit. Like I don't
right.
know what I'm doing about booking angles, and I didn't even know how to write a card out at the time. And he just
Mm,
like he's basically telling me, look, man, I have no other option. And then
mm,
he's like, well, I'm like, well, just book this show. We'll see how it goes, and then we'll talk after. And then he booked the show, and it was just awful. Like nothing made sense, and there was 10 run-ins, and this was back when the locker room was on top of the snack bar, so we were like running
yeah.
through the audience. It was just really bad. And I
Yeah.
said, okay, bro, well, if you're gonna have me book, I got to come in as an part owner, because I need to have more control over what's going on. So he
Mm,
brought me in as an owner, booker, and then he worked out a deal with the Stockton guys and said, hey, we'll train you guys if you give us the ring for free, and then we'll get you guys some matches on the shows. So he basically hoarded me out to train these guys. And I was even telling him at the point, I said, listen, man, I know how to coach football and do martial arts. I trained martial arts for years. I don't know how to train wrestlers. Like I've been graduated for like 6 months.
mm,
And what he told me was like, yeah, but you know more than them. So just bring them in. We just got to get the ring. We only got to use a couple of their guys. And so it was kind of a trade-off. And then I just got really into training them. And I was having so much fun. They were learning. Then I started going like to LA, and I would go down there with Jesse Hernandez and train a little bit. And I just started going wherever I can to learn more about wrestling, to
mm,
train off guys who've been there. And if any seminar that came up, I drive to. I mean, just driving all over the place. Like the first time I went to Oregon wasn't to wrestle; it was to do a training seminar that I think it was Quackenbush had one, and I was a huge fan for Quackenbush, and I went just to watch to be a part of that, and I just did like a lot of things like that. I was just trying to make myself the best trainer I could, and I ended up taking over the book and booking
mm,
for a while. I think I said about a year and a half. Rich kind of started backing away a little bit. He got in. Him and his wife were going through some trouble, and
mm,
there was a big drama where, me and him didn't have a falling out, but he just stopped caring about SPW. So he
mm,
missed the show, and then he wouldn't come like to training and to just hang out. Wouldn't return my calls. And then what had ended up happening was him and his wife had a falling out. She told him that me and her were messing around. And
Oh.
so of course he was fucking had heat with me, and I didn't know none of this, you know. And then
Mhm.
finally one day he came by the Colonial, and he's like, "Hey, we need to talk." And I'm like, I missed the guy, you know. And we just
Yeah.
started talking, and he told me, he's like, you know, I think it was going on with him and Maria was her name, and he's like, she even said that you guys messed around. I was like, what the fuck? What do you mean? And
Mhm.
yeah, I was just like, Rich, you know, that's damn was not true. I was happily married with my wife. We had, you know, had the kid, but we just had, I think, Salem at the time, and uh, it was just like I was. He goes, I know. I was just, you know, all this stuff was going on, and so I just had to stay away. And I was like, oh, it's understandable, bro. And so we talked a little bit. He wanted to come back in and manage, and then like, no shit, like a month and a half later, he passed away. And
Wow.
yeah, and he was, I guess because he was having a lot of health problems. He went into the hospital, and I forgot which one it was, like some county or something, but they had they're giving him blood or something, and whatever thing the artery was in popped out, and it was underneath him, and he kind of bled out. So
Mhm.
he passed away because of that. And I remember at the funeral, they had me do the eulogy, and then I finally had talked to his ex-wife, and she apologized. She, you know, she was just frustrated. She knew that would piss him off, you know, and all this stuff. But, you know, it's
Yeah.
all forgiven, you know. And I gave his kids a big hug, and you know, so it was, you know, a sad ending, but it was good that we got to close those ties before he passed away, you know, and I got to see him again one more time. But yeah, so that's basically what happened after he passed. I was already in charge, and the day he passed, the owner of the Colonial, Hewitt, said, "Hey, um, I'm sorry, the last show he booked for us, it was during Christmas time, and he didn't promote it at all. And
Mhm.
this is right. I'm sorry, this was right before I had taken over completely. He didn't promote it at all. So we had 6 people in the building,
Oh,
and that's not I'm
jeez.
not including wrestlers' girlfriends and kids and stuff. But there were 6 paid in attendance. And I remember I had
Mhm.
my old VHC camera, and I'm out there going, "This is what happens when you're not promoted." Blah blah. And then that's when he stopped showing up after that show. So Hugh was telling me, you know, we got to regroup. We have to do something. He goes, we may not have wrestling here anymore. And
Mhm.
so it was back in that was December. In February we regrouped, and I contacted XPW because they
Mhm.
had, of course, they were Coach Nugs was there as Pogo the Clown, and we brought in like Supreme and Joey Chaos and D and I think Angel came down a couple times, and we had like 400 people in that building. That show it just blew up,
Mhm.
and then we were like, well, let's keep rocking, and then we just started rolling from there. But yeah, we were basically one show away from just shutting down completely there, you know.
Wow, man. Crazy. You know, I go away for 2 years and all that stuff happens, and
Yeah,
that's nuts, man. You know, and that's it. I'm glad that you kept it going because we all I remember, you know, all that stuff that was going on between like Cooley and Schizo, and you know, because I was there for all of that. I mean, I was the first guy. You know, I don't know if you know this. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but so me meeting Rich Roby went like this. I was doing the backyard stuff. I had gotten a lot of like, you know, Sacramento Bee and all the radio stations and all the TV stations were coming out because backyard wrestling was hot at that point.
yeah,
And so I was the backyard guy. And so Rich calls me and he goes, "Hey, I'm putting together a pro wrestling promotion." And I'd heard other promoters call me and do that before, and it was never like a legit thing. You know what I mean? It was always something stupid or somebody saying they had a ring, and then I'd go in there and it was like a stick in the ground with a bunch
yeah,
of wire. You know what I mean? It wasn't real. So I said, "Well, how do I know that you're real?" And he said, "You know, meet me at this address." And I went down there, and it was in Stockton Boulevard, and I was like, "That's not a great spot." So I got my biggest friends. It was like, "We're going down there, right?" And so we go down there, and he walks us in there, and he says, "I want to put wrestling in here once a month. Can you help me?" And because Rich didn't know what he was doing, right? So he was
yeah,
like, "Can you book it?" And I was like, no. You know what I mean? I was like,
yeah,
I've only done like 2 months of training, and none of these guys I'm working with have any training at all. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So I was like, that's when I actually went to Hustler, and because I'd met Hustler after Ollie had moved to LA. I'd met Hustler and he wanted to train me, and I was like, not a good idea. I was like, that's not a good idea, and so, but I knew him from Hard Time Billiards, so I went over to talk to him, and that's how Cooley got the book because I introduced
oh,
Rich
okay,
to Hustler, who were Hustler hooked him up to Cooley because Hustler didn't want to book anything; he just wanted to
yeah,
wrestle.
yeah,
So that's how Cooley got involved. And then, well, before it was Cooley, he got Schizo involved, and dude,
Yeah.
that was the biggest mess ever. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, he was just, I mean, because I knew him from Ollie's, from Pro I Am, and he was always kind of a little off. You talk
Mhm.
about Dante, something's not wired right. Neither was Schizo. And so they had a big falling out because I had gotten Fox 40 to come and do a show. Schizo had the book. We were using Schizo's ring, and I had gotten Fox 40 to come and do a profile on me. And the idea was like backyarder goes pro type
Mhm.
of thing to promote the show. So when I walk in, Schizo is so mad that I have the TV there. And he's like, I don't want backyarders on my show, blah, 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 blah. If he's on the show, no, you want to do something on this, but if he's on it, no. So the Fox 40 left. And
Oh
so, and
wow.
then same thing. Rich was like, I can't have you on the show, man. He's my booker, and he's gonna walk with the ring. I can't. So I didn't work the show. I was like, that's fine, and I walked out. And they didn't draw well at all on
Yeah.
that one. And so that's when they brought Cooley in, and Cooley was like, yeah, man, because he wasn't really at that point. He hadn't been trained really at all either. He spent like a cup of coffee at APW, and then stole their address book with all the names, phone numbers in it.
Yeah.
So 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 yeah, and so anyway, but then I'm the one who initially contacted the Stockton guys because I heard they had a ring. They were another backyard promotion, and we all went down there. So it was just really kind of everything kind of fit together because we were all. I remember talking to all those guys and us all just being like, we finally have a place that
Mhm.
like we can build something exciting that all every backyarder has a dream of taking their backyard promotion pro,
Yeah.
like what TWF did.
Yeah.
And so it was just kind of cool that you were there to kind of pick up those reins and make it what it was.
Yeah.
Who well, before we go more into that, I want to go back and ask, so you played football and you did
Mhm.
martial arts.
Yeah.
Tell me more about where you grew up and how you that came about.
I originally grew up in Tracy, California. Uh,
Hmm.
basically lived there till I was sixth grade is when I moved up here,
Hmm.
and it was just it wasn't a great environment.
Hmm.
I'll start by saying that I don't know if you know about the Tracy Stockton area. It's
Yeah, I do.
pretty bad. And my brother, my older brother, was really into the Norteños. He's really
Hmm.
into the gang, and
Hmm.
that's basically kind of where all my family leaned towards and kind of went towards. And um, about in sixth grade, I remember one day I just told my mom, I want to move to Sac with my dad. I just
Hmm.
I just felt there was a dead end. Like I wasn't doing nothing. I would walk to school every day, come home, and then we'd be hanging out in the streets. My mom worked
Hmm.
several jobs, to make ends meet, and I just wanted to go stay there, And I came up to Sacramento with my dad, and my dad was out of my life for a lot of years. I think
Hmm.
fourth or fifth grade, he finally came back into my life. And
Hmm.
so I came up here. I come here a couple weekends. I remember what they're drawing. The key factor in me wanting to come up here was when he would pick me up on the weekends. He picked me up every time TC Martin was bringing WWE to the Memorial Auditorium.
Yeah.
My first exposure to wrestling was at the auditorium, and I remember he brought me up here the first time, and we went, and I just was in awe. I just was like, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life." Went
Yeah.
back home, and that's all I talked about was wrestling. So he'd bring me up every month when the loop would hit, and we'd go watch that, and a lot of roller derby too was big at the
Yeah.
time. You know,
Where were
uh,
they? Where were they doing that? Were they still doing that at that roller rink over by the drive-in?
no, it was in the auditorium.
Oh, they were
It was
doing it in the
auditorium.
memorial.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it was
interesting.
in there on the floor right there on the basketball court. Right. The reason why we would find out about that is because we go to wrestling. They'd have flyers up for the roller derby, so that
Yeah.
would be this is the next time you're coming up. So it was basically like happened where it's like almost every 2 weeks there was something going on. One or the other
Mhm.
was going on. So that just became my way I would bond with my dad. He'd bring me up here for that. And I remember just one day I was sitting at home. It was like Thanksgiving Day, and I just told my mom, I want to go with my dad, dude. I just was done. Like there was nothing for me down there in Tracy. My
Wow.
cousins were all little thugs, and all my friends were little thugs. And I just came up here. And the first weekend I came up, he put me into martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is cool. And where we had lived was in what's called Southport here in West Sac, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the kind of situation where we're so far out there where you don't go to the store, you go to town because there's
Mm-hmm.
no stores out there. So you have to like you can't walk up to the
Right.
store. You gotta drive a couple miles into town, so I didn't have nowhere to get in trouble, like to do
Mm,
nothing stupid, be
mm,
a little banger or nothing like that. So Saturdays he'd take me to karate. I'd stay there for like 4 hours and train. He'd go buy me food, take me back home. Him and my stepmom would come back to town and go to the bar and stuff. And I'd be at home watching DVDs of wrestling, or the DVDs, VHSs of wrestling, and the martial arts Saturday matinees. And I would just
mm.
do that every Saturday. That was my Saturday, and Sunday was watching football. And kind of just calmed me down, and really, really taught me to be independent and alone, and be productive. So I would, because I was doing martial arts, I was constantly training martial arts, punching my heavy bag, and just doing push-ups and sit-ups and just everything I could to be a better martial artist. And then watch wrestling
Mhm.
because I loved it. And that just became my thing, man. Doing that until I got into high school. Was all about watching wrestling and doing martial arts.
So in those days, well, first of all, what form of martial arts were you doing?
It's called Kyokushin.
Okay.
And we started towards the end there. We started dabbling in a little bit more kung fu based, and then one of my his name was senpai. He started getting into jujitsu, which I didn't know what the fuck it was at the time, and it was just
Right.
jujitsu. What the hell is that? That's like a ninja stuff. And, I was just totally into to fighting, to stand up martial arts. It was kind of like just karate, doing tournaments
Yeah.
and doing all that stuff, and I excelled in that a lot. Like I did really well on that. Won a lot of
Mm,
tournaments, had a couple state titles, and was really big with AAU for my weight division, or my age division.
mm,
And
mm,
once I got into high school, I got into other things like football and stuff, so kind of just stopped really worrying about martial arts. But yeah, that's
mm.
just basically what my life was that, and I had really nothing else to do,
Yeah. So when you were watching wrestling back then, I mean, those shows at the Memorial Auditorium, those are just generally house shows. I mean, who were the guys that you loved watching the most?
And the first card I went to, the first guys I was exposed to was the Wild Samoans versus the Moondogs,
Oh,
and
man, that'd have been awesome.
I was just sitting there going like, "Are you kidding me? These guys are terrifying. Both sides, both guys are terrifying. They were both just like, man, these guys like want to kill these people out here. None of them
Yeah.
talked. They were just all grunting and groaning, and I was just so entertained. The second match was, I think it was Tony Garea versus B. Brian Blair. Like I said, I pretty much know the whole card. The third match is the one that would go on to be like probably my favorite match ever, even though I only remember a little bit about it. Was Rocky Johnson versus Roddy Piper.
Oh
Was
man.
was just I watched that, and I was just telling my dad, that guy is an asshole. Like Roddy Piper was just a total asshole. Like, and here you got this big black dude just coming in fast, pop, pop, throwing these punches, and Roddy just coming in, pop, eye poking him. Just it was
Yeah.
one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life. And Jimmy Snuka was on that card. I think he wrestled Volkov, and then the main was Hogan and Stud, and
Oh wow.
that was really one that drew me in was Hogan, because I looking back now, like the only thing I remember about that match is when Stud does this and Hogan goes like he's gonna press him, and the place went ape shit, and like I didn't even know
Mhm.
what was going on at the time, and I was
Yeah.
just like, man, listening to all these people just chant, and I was just like, man, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, and I was just so hooked, like so hooked from that
You know,
experience. And
you know what was crazy about so Hulk Hogan. So my first match was at the Arco Arena. What years were those? By the way, those memorial shows.
probably 85, 86, something like around there. It was
Yeah.
right when I moved up here in sixth grade, or I think seventh grade is when they had the first WrestleMania, the closed circuit. We watched it on
Okay.
closed circuit at that arena, at that auditorium.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember seeing WrestleMania 2 and 3 at the old Arco Arena.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, my first show at the old Arco Arena, I don't remember any of the matches other than the main event. I think I was maybe 4 years old, maybe five. But it was the Bulldogs versus the Dream Team in a cage.
Oh wow.
And I mean, they beat the tar out of each other. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
it was so crazy. Everybody's bleeding, and
Yeah.
I just and yeah, it was just my voice lost my voice. Memorial Auditorium though, Memorial Auditorium is such a good venue for wrestling.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
um, man, it's such a I I saw TC Martin ran some of those I think they called them like World Wrestling Council or National Wrestling Council shows.
Council. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the late '90s with
Yeah.
Sabu and all. Did you go to any of those shows?
No, I didn't go to any of those shows.
Oh
No.
man, I went to one, and it was Jake the Snake, and Coco Beware against Greg Valentine and the Honky Tonk Man, and Jake was just blitzed out of his mind. and and Honky carried the match,
Yeah,
and so it was pretty awesome. But anyway, so you get into martial arts. So you go to high school in West Sac. What school did you go to?
yeah. River City High School.
No kidding. And so you ended
Yeah,
up coaching out there,
yeah. I was
right?
pretty much part of that school's damn near 25 years, from the
Yeah,
old campus to the new campus. Yeah, I graduated in '91, and then I went to the military for a year and a half. Came back, started coaching.
man.
So it was almost close to 25 years where I was a coach there.
Wow. So now you go to the military. What branch?
I was Army.
Okay. And
Yeah.
so, what prompted you to do that?
Just because like I didn't know what else to do with my life. You know, like I was
Mm,
saying, I was heavily into martial arts, and but I mean, you at that time you really couldn't make a living off of it. You know, and it was
mm,
just was like the kung fu magazines, karate magazines, but those guys are all like world class fighters. And I was getting, like I said, I got really into football, and
mm,
I was supposed to go to Humboldt. So I got an offer to go to Humboldt State. Went there in a summer camp, got into some trouble, and they no longer wanted to recruit me. So I
mm,
was like, I can't go to a Division I school and play football.
mm,
And at this point, like when I was in high school, I mean, I don't want to read off all the accolades, put myself over, but I was a pretty good offensive lineman, and I was only 165 pounds. Like I was a
mm,
small lineman. Like when we
mm,
had the All-Star game, I was the smallest guy on the team, and I mean
mm,
by a long shot. Like I think the kicker was a little lighter than me, but he was taller than me. But all the linemen, like
mm,
I looked like a dwarf next to him because they're just all
mm.
275, 285. And here comes this 165-pound lineman from West Sacramento.
Yeah.
But so after they sent me home from camp. Um, I was kind of like don't know what to do with myself. Like what do I do now? Like I was planning on playing football the rest of my life, and
Mm,
just being a college student and graduating, getting my degree, and hopefully playing in the NFL or something, and uh, now I'm smarter to know but that was a long shot. But at the time, you're thinking, hey, I can make it.
sure.
So I was just sitting at home, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to give the military a shot. And I picked the
Mm,
Army because it was the first recruiting office that I saw. And
mm,
I remember it was over there off of Arden, where the comedy, what is it, Punchline or something is, whatever that
yeah.
comedy club it is. It was right underneath there, and I was just the first one I knew where it was. So I went and talked to the guy, and
Mm,
he's like, "Yeah, we'll get you in there to MEPS and blah blah." And then it was history. I was off in like six
yeah.
months to boot camp or basic training.
Wow. And so you said you spent about a year and a half out there. What happened with
Yeah,
that?
I during basic I blew my knees out, and
Mm,
then I finally made it through my PT test because that was holding me back from going to my duty station. And
mm,
or for my next, because we were what's called OSIT, what's one station unit training. So after basic, I finally passed. Then they sent me to jump school for 80. So I was going to be a paratrooper,
mm,
and on the final jump, I blew my knees out again. So
mm,
I graduated, got my blood wings and everything, and they took me to the doctors and they shot my knee up with this dye, and they're like, "Dude, you have no cartilage in your knees." And I
mm,
was like, "Okay, so what does that mean?" And they go, "We can do this, we can do that, or you can just deal with the pain." And I was like, well, let's just deal with the pain and see what happens. And my unit left. They all went to North Carolina and
mm,
to Fort Bragg. So I was about 6 months behind them. And when I finally had passed my physical and my knees, I could make it through my 2 mile run. They sent me down there. They all had shipped out. So I was basically on post by myself. Not by myself, but in my little company, there was four of us there while the unit
mm,
was gone, and we were basically answering phones for 12 hours a day. And
mm,
I just told my doc, I'm like, dude, I can't deal with this. Like mentally, this is not what I got in this for. And
mm,
they had sent me through the doc a couple of times, and they're just like, well, here's the option: you can do surgery in here, or we can send you back home, and you can do it out there as a civilian. And I was like, yeah, get me the fuck out of here. I don't want to be here
mm,
anymore. And it was
mm,
just because of boredom. Like I said, we're 12 hours a day. And it was four of us, two of us at a time, and it was just like, I can't do this for two more or another year and a half. So they gave me the
right.
option to opt out, full disability and everything. So I did. Went home.
Mm, man.
And that was it. Yeah,
Yeah.
came home
So
and
now
what?
when you go through all this, how are you feeling as you're going through all this? I mean, was it kind of a letdown to be coming back, or how did that?
Yeah, mostly because I had nothing to come back to.
Mhm.
Football was out of the question. Martial arts. I mean, at this point, like, it was more for kids now. Like, it
Mhm.
was the school I was going to wasn't really doing tournaments anymore. It was all doing katas and forms and stuff, and they weren't doing a lot of tournaments. And that's what I loved doing, was the tournaments. So actually, for a brief second, I had contemplated, because this was back. They had some fighting thing. It was like before UFC. It was some fake fucking fighting thing they had. Guys had like a blaster on his arm, and it was just some stupid thing they had. It was like, I was like, oh man, maybe I could get into acting or something and do something like that, like a stuntman. And then
Mhm.
about a month later is when the first UFC happened, and I was like,
Oh,
man, I want to do this. Like, this is what I want to do.
yeah.
At the same point is when I found the APW school, and I was like,
Mm.
man, I can do this UFC thing that's brand new and it looks fun, and I like to fight, so I could do that. Or I can go to the wrestling school and become a millionaire, because that's what you think when you get into wrestling, you're gonna be a millionaire.
Right.
So I decided to do wrestling, and then that's when I finally went into wrestling and did that.
Man, wow.
But
So
yeah.
now tell me now, you said your dad was out of your life for a long time. Uh, is your dad still alive?
Oh, he passed in 2009.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, tell me about your dad and your relationship with him.
We oh man, you're gonna get me. He was a good man. Didn't always do good things, but he was a good man. He was a really, really
Mm.
good caring father. He didn't know how to be a dad when I first came up. So I made a lot of mistakes, but he always had my best interests in mind. He his biggest vice was drinking. He was an alcoholic,
Mm. Mm.
functioning alcoholic. Like, I probably can count the times I've seen him sober on my hand. And not that he was
Mm.
always slobbering drunk, but you could always tell he had a drink in him. It was just
Mm.
buzzing all the time.
Mm.
But he worked his ass off. We always worked two jobs and just worked on the weekends to make extra money for us, and made sure I had everything I needed. And he really taught me what it's like to just work your ass off and put your family first. But like I said, he had that vice of just wanting to drink a lot. And
Mm.
at the time when I'm growing up, I'm thinking, well, he has the right to. It's his house, it's his life. He's led a
Yeah.
full life, and it's his. Is not nothing. And, I was always brought up around people drinking and stuff, so it wasn't a big issue to me. It was the first time I've been exposed to somebody like staying home all day to drink, or
Mhm.
like I said, they would take me to karate, bring me home, and then they'd go back to the bar, and I wouldn't see them till midnight. You know,
Mm.
um, so that was kind of like his vice. But we were really close. We were really close. You know, later on, like when I moved out and stuff, of course we didn't see each other as much, but we'd always make it a point to do certain things. Like when the Lakers were in the finals, we'd always watch it together. We watch
Mm.
Raider games there on Monday nights, things like that. So
Mm.
every time, of course, birthday parties and all the holidays and stuff like that. But yeah, he was definitely a interesting man that taught me a lot of things to do right, and a lot of things to do wrong that to this day I don't do, because I saw my dad do things he shouldn't have done.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting because I'm the same way. My dad, he's a good guy too, but he definitely had his vices. His vices were, he's an alcoholic and a drug addict, or was. He's been sober for over 25 years now. And same thing, man. Like my dad, he even when he was, on his binges or he was out doing bad things, he was always
Hmm.
working hard and always sending money, making sure that, even when he was like not around, he always tried his best to, keep us afloat. And
Yeah.
yeah, you learn a lot about what not to do, but you learn a lot about what to do. My work ethic comes, I'm convinced my work ethic comes from him. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so now, did you ever, you know, feel like you had any resentment towards your dad for not being there at the beginning?
Not really, because that's just
Mm.
like I said. It was just I didn't know the reasons why he was out of my life until later
Mm.
on, and I kind of figured it out. But it just, most of the families I were around were one parent, had their mom, and that was it.
Mm.
I was never exposed to a dad wanting his kids and fighting for his kids. It was always the dad would go do stupid things, and the mom would be home with the kids. And
Mm.
I was never really exposed to having a father figure in the home, anyways. For a short time, it was my brother, and then he
Mm-hmm.
kept getting locked up and he was gone all the time. So a lot of times I really didn't have that male role model in my life. It was kind of my mom
Mm-hmm.
kind of directed me somewhat. And when he finally came back in, he changed himself enough to where he was able to raise me. But at that point, I was already older, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of raised myself in a way. My sister was a big part of raising me as well. My middle sister, she was a big part of raising me, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of keeping me level headed and on the right path. And but yeah, I mean, it's pretty much kind of like that's probably why I flocked towards wrestling so bad, because like those guys were the guys I wanted to be. The badasses
Mm-hmm.
that were making money and famous and doing something they loved. And you gotta say, at this point, I thought wrestling was real anyway. So I'm thinking like these guys are
Right.
making money. These guys are making money fighting people. Like, dude, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like, and then of course my martial artists, my coaches, all those people kind of shaped me the right way and wrong way to do things, and how to kind of just like. I remember one football game I went to. My senior year, I became really really popular as far as football, like being in the newspaper and things like that, and coaches coming to watch me play from other like colleges and stuff. And I remember one game my dad was drunk at one of the games, and he worked for the school district, so he was friends with all the janitors and stuff. And
Yeah.
he was sitting on one of the carts just fucking slobbering drunk. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just I'm going like, fuck, man. The college guy wants to talk. There was a guy from Humboldt State wanted to talk to my dad, and my dad's over there just fucking, could smell it on
Yeah.
him. And I remember my coach goes, "Hey, let's just go to the locker room. Just go head to the locker room. We'll talk in there." So we passed right by. My dad doesn't even see us there because he's so slobber and drunk, And so we go in the
Mm-hmm.
locker room and then we talk. And then I remember my coach saying, "Oh yeah, he's out there. He can't come in here, but what do you need?" So we talk to the coaches and stuff. And my coach just tells me, "Hey, you got to just suck it up, and he's your dad, so you got to love him either way." And he's like, when he's ready to change, he'll change. And he never did. He was never ready. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just just my dad. It's just like I said, I don't love him or hate him anymore for it. It's just what he was. Just he had a vice that he didn't ever wanted to get rid of. Some people have that voice telling them, "Hey, you got to change this." My dad had a really good. My stepmom was a really good woman, and
Mm-hmm.
she put up with a lot for my dad. So I
Mm-hmm.
totally give her credit to this day for being kind of and also like another figure in my life that helped raise me. She had her vices as well, but she put up a lot with my dad and kind of just helped mentor me to how to deal with it, how to deal with
Mm-hmm.
it and make it all work.
Yeah. Man. So, when your dad passed, did you hold any resentment towards him for having those vices, or did you just say, "Hey, that's just who he was"?
Like in every aspect of my life, just my way I think about things is like, you can never change the past, and you just have to accept things the way they are. So you
Mm-hmm.
can hold resentment or hate somebody or be pissed off or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's just going to eat you alive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure if my dad could do things a different way, he would have. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure I would have as well, growing up.
Yeah.
I'm sure everybody in my life, if you could change things in your life, you would, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't. So there's no sense in dwelling on it. Or, I spoke at his funeral too. I did the eulogy of that one. And I basically said to everybody, like, because at this point, like my dad was doing like a part-time janitor job, and it's one thing if it's at a church. And
Mm-hmm.
people who know me know that like I'm not a real religious guy. I'm not one of these guys who hate religion. I'm just not. That's just not in me who I am. But
Mm-hmm.
we go to this church. They're doing the banquet and all that stuff for him, and everybody's getting up there talking about him like they knew him, and all they're talking about is, oh man, he performed miracles every night. That we'd come in and the place is so clean, and he was a great Raider fan. I'm gonna get up there. I'm like, that's all you guys know about my dad is that he mopped your floors and that he was a Raider fan. Like, that's all you know. And they're all like, I said, dude, my dad was Superman to me. He was like my
Mm-hmm.
hero. Like I would go to sleep at night. Like I go to sleep at night, and he'd be coming home from work when I woke up because he'd work graveyard. And then
Mm-hmm.
we'd go cut lawns on Sunday morning, Saturday mornings, to make extra money. Like he was more than just a guy who cleans your floors. And I actually got like a little upset. Like this is all you guys know
Yeah.
about my father is that he was a Raider fan because he wore a Raider hat and he cleaned your floors and emptied your garbage. And You know, not to demean my dad because he did whatever he did to make money, but you know, I'm just like saying he was much more than just your janitor. You know, and you
Yeah.
guys can't even scratch the surface of what my dad was and what he meant to a lot of people. And so I got up and I got a little pissed off and said my thing, and then they told me afterwards they didn't really understand where I was coming from at first, but they got it. You know, but yeah, man, it was like if you just hold those things in, man, it's just you end up missing all those good things with that person, you know, like all the good times that my dad had, you know, and him when he finally got to meet my, you know, hold my kids for the first time, and you know, at their birthday parties and stuff, and you know, I've always been a pretty strong person, so whatever happened to me, it's just in the past, you know. As long as he was good to my kids, you know,
Mhm.
and that's all that matters, you know. That's how I want to remember him, you know,
Yeah.
for
So,
the
so,
good things.
so let me ask you, if you could get 5 minutes with your dad right now, what would you say to him?
Um, Part of me wants to say the Raiders suck right now, but it'll get better. Uh, but just I would just say, look at your grandkids. You know, look what your grandkids are doing. You know, and um, just tell them thank you. You know,
Yeah.
just yeah, just tell them thank you, like for all the good lessons he taught me. You know, and in the
Yeah.
good times. You know, like I said, it kind of in a weird way, like he's the reason why I'm who I am today, and a lot of people are who they are today. Because had my dad not took me to that first wrestling show, I probably would have never been a wrestling fan. You know, had he not
Yeah.
taken me from where I was living, I probably wouldn't be here at all today. You know, so
Yeah.
if you think of like me going to that one wrestling show and then falling in love with it, and then coming back and opening up my school and taking over SPW, all the people who've came out of that system there, and you just think of the people who have like Mike Hayashi and Cassie have kids. Chupi
Yeah.
has kids from all the stuff that wrestling spawned, you know, all the friendships that came out of that, and people to this day that I consider my family, my friends, you know, just you know, people I would have never met, you know, but that was all because I always take it back, just all because my dad took me to that first wrestling show and made me fall in love with something, and he just took me because he didn't know what else to do with the kid, you know. His
Yeah.
dad took him to wrestling, so he just said, "I guess I'll take mine," you know. And because of that moment right there, that one choice he made was probably the best choice in my life. Who knows? But you know, on the flip side, maybe I would have been a millionaire doing something else.
Yeah.
But
You'd have been a UFC fighter.
yeah, yeah, you know, who knows? But you know, like I said, he took me in when I first time I asked him. He's like, "We'll go down there tomorrow and get your stuff," and
Yeah.
didn't even ask questions. You know, just brought me up, and you know, just always he always supported me in wrestling. You know, and always
Yeah.
went to every show I did. The Colonial, he was there. He was there
Yeah.
watching it and enjoying it. You know, and he's so proud of everything I did with wrestling. And I know he'd be overjoyed with the kids right now. Like he would love watching them work right now. You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, that's you know,
Well,
it's just.
you isn't it interesting? Like you sit there and you think about it's funny because I always ask people, and I'll ask you the same questions. Like well, I don't always ask this, but sometimes you think about things that you regret or things that you resentment. Like I held a lot of resentment for my dad for a lot of years because of
Yeah.
some of the stuff he did. Like we ended up because he ended up having to go to rehab. I think it was either my junior or senior year of high school. We had to he had to go to rehab, and we ended up losing our house and losing everything. We ended up having to move into this other house, but that other house was the house that had the backyard big enough to put a ring in. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
if we had never moved, I would have never been involved in any of this. As far as Northern California wrestling, I just would have never
Yeah.
been involved. And same thing with you. Like I frequently talk about, I think the coolest thing about being involved in wrestling, especially here in Northern California, is there are so many people from so many different walks of life. Like I'm Sacramento raised. I lived at, I went to Del Campo. You
Yeah.
went to River City. Like I don't know if we would have ever met if it wasn't for the
Oh
fact
yeah.
that we had wrestling in common, and Rich Roby decided to put wrestling in the Colonial Theater.
Yeah.
And there are so many people like that. It makes it special. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's
Yeah.
it's a community. And
Yeah.
so now part of that community, you play a huge role in that community because really, even when I came back from from my mission, there still was only really SPW and APW, and then I think Devil Mountain came later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as things got hot, there was a time where everybody was just nobody was in sync. Everybody was hating on everybody. Tell us about those years because when did you stop? When did you stop promoting SPW and hand it off to Samurai?
I want to say that was probably, man, 2010, 2011, maybe something like that. Around
Okay.
then, maybe. No,
Uh-huh.
it was a little later than that because I was still in 2012. I was in Oregon and I was coming back. So it was probably like 2013, 2014. Yeah, around then
Okay.
is when it was when
Interesting.
I had officially backed out of then because I was kind of letting them book shows in Petaluma at what they called Punk Slam at the time.
Mhm.
But I was still running basically the shows over at SPW at the Colonial, and then we started going to St. Peter's Hall. So
Mm,
that was probably around that time right there.
mm,
20, I would say
okay.
2013, 2014 ish. Yeah.
Okay. So in the time that you were promoting, there were a ton of guys that came through there. I mean, the Scum came through there. Paul Isadora. I remember they had this guy. I don't know where he was from, but he was like a lucha libre chicken guy. I remember
El
watching
Guyanero.
him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Guyanero Cuatro. Yeah, he's from LA.
yeah, that guy was fun. And then
Yeah.
of
Well,
course like Flacco and Samurai. You know,
what people
uh,
don't like about that time there is when like a lot of the guys, like people don't even remember like Scorpio Sky was working for us. The Bucks
mhm,
came down and was working for us. Cholo B Boy, like all those guys were coming down here working for us, and then
mhm,
Guy Narquata later became Charles Mercury, and they were all working for us. Joey
mhm,
Chaos was, from Santino, he owned Santino Supreme was coming down for us, and we were getting a lot of those guys coming down, for us
mhm,
working for us because I had a working relationship with those guys.
mhm,
So yeah, we started really doing pretty decent numbers, bringing in that talent, But we had the Bucks before they were really famous. Like I remember telling them, dude, the super kick shit's never gonna get over. It's fucking stupid. Like you can't not sell it. And now they're making $1 million, But
yeah.
they just knew, and yeah,
Mhm.
they worked for us a lot at the St. Peter's Hall at first. Where they were started working for
Oh,
us,
nice.
but we started. I mean, because we had that our sister company was NAW in Fresno. Mike Rain was running it. He also started using a lot of those LA guys, and we were kind of using them together, all worked together. And then Devil Mountain popped up, and
Mhm,
Brawl popped up, and so we were working with all these. In the Reno Wrestle Factory in Reno was running, and they were part of our bigger system, But so we had a lot of people that are pretty well known names now that were working for us at the time. Of course, Morrison and was there, and so we just had a lot of talent coming through, man. That now are pretty big names in the industry.
yeah. So now tell me, during those years, who do you think, other than yourself, was so would have been you consider the most integral person in SPW's success?
I would say for probably the first 10 years, it'd be Flacco.
Hmm.
It would be
Hmm.
Flacco. And of course, he won't take credit for it, but to this day, like I tell people when I book people, I book them for value. Like, what can I get out of them? For
Hmm.
of course paid, and I don't pay Flacco much, but like what do I get out of using Flacco besides his matches in the ring? If I need a commentator, he's the best at it. If I need a ref, he'll ref, and he's the best at it. If I need flyers made, Flacco will do it. Flacco's a promotion whore. Like he promotes everything he does. He blows it up on social media. He does everything for me. Like he's like pretty much an extension of me on these shows. Like he does a lot of the stuff I need done. If I need him just to be backstage and run stage for me, he'll do it with no questions asked. For Lucha Extreme, he's my champ right now. I took him up to Ohio this weekend. He wrestled a main event against Eric Short, undersized guy, let's say.
Yeah.
And they had a great match. And Flacco, he's always a babyface now, but I made him be heel, and he lit it up. Like they hated him because he went back to the old Flacco. But he
Hmm.
done so much stuff with like helping wrestlers make T-shirts and show them how to promote, and getting us into some venues that he would do like his punk band would play at. He'd get us that he got us to Phoenix Theater at first when we were doing Punk Slam over there. But
Hmm.
he's what I learned a lot about promotion about is from Flacco because he did the punk thing. Like I learned how
Hmm.
important handbills are. Handing a handbill to somebody is more important than putting a stack on a table somewhere, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I just learned a lot from him. And then, you know, people give me credit for a lot of the stuff that we did in those early days, but a lot of the offensive stuff was Flacco's idea. He just, because his job, he'd always push it off on me and say it was my idea, you know. But yeah, there's been a lot of times where he's had to control me because I wanted to do something that was way over the top. So he's had to be my kind of my voice of reason a lot of times, you know. But definitely him, that he doesn't get enough credit for what he's done behind the scenes with the wrestling. I mean, God, he's probably drew the most heat of anybody we've had there, other than I would say myself as a heel, and then Oliver John for a short time as a heel drew a lot of heat. After that, I'd have to say it'd probably be Sir Samurai for the
Mm-hmm.
next 10 years after me and Flacco had been gone. He's done a lot of great things with that company. A little different than when I ran it, but he's been the driving force behind it. He's got some people in places right now, and they're doing really well. And they always give me a place when I want to go back and work. So I think for those first 10 years, I'll just break it down to 20 years. It'd be Flacco and then Samurai after that.
Yeah. So are you booking Lucha Extreme now?
Yeah, I book for Lucha Extreme. I book for PAW for Pat Kelly whenever he runs, and then of course the Ugly Dojo. So
Nice, man.
yeah,
So now, where were your, if you've been around for a very long time. So who is your, let's start with your Mount Rushmore of NorCal wrestling during your time.
well, I would probably, I'm gonna say most people around here don't know. I would be remiss if I didn't say Roland Alexander. We
Mhm.
did towards before he passed. We kind of mended fence. Like I said, most of the heat was his side and not mine. But I would
Mhm.
say Roland, Modest.
Mhm.
Uh, there'd be an argument for Vic Grimes.
Mhm.
Man, other than that, the last one probably. I know it's kind of selfish for me to say it, and a lot of people may not agree. But it'd probably be Vinny Massaro.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, just
Why
because
do you
people
put,
don't
why do
realize.
you put, yeah,
Was
tell me
that
why you put him up there. Tell me why you put him up there.
well for pretty much the last 20 years he's been arguably the best talent we've had. People don't give him credit for what he does in the ring. Like the dude's creative as hell. He gets anything over. He just his overall psychology and creativeness is ridiculous, and people don't give him credit for the people he's trained. Like he's trained a lot of fucking people. He trained Cain Velasquez and Dalip Singh or whatever his name is, and just all the guys that he put out there. Then he can work anybody. Like he can work any style. He's probably the only guy in NorCal I know that can work luchadors, speak Spanish to him. He can work European style. He can work just any. He can do whatever you need done. He's quiet about it, but he's probably the most well traveled, other than like Modest and Morgan and those guys. But yeah, I don't think he. That's why I'm saying it. It'd be an argument, but people don't give him enough credit. I know him on a different level than most. So like I've been in the ring and seen him make me look like $1 million. He was my tag partner for a lot of years. And just like I tell people, like he trains, he books, he wrestles everywhere. I mean, he's just the guys overall has done a lot of great things. He's been to Japan, been to Mexico, and he's done a lot, man. He's done a lot, but people don't give him enough credit, for what he does. And I know a
What do you
lot of
think?
I'm probably the only person that would put him on that Mount Rushmore, but I would have to say it's because I'm in the business. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
he's the best wrestler. Like if I was going to say the best wrestler, pure like wrestling, it would have to be Oliver John or Adam, but
Yeah.
not enough people know who Oliver John is.
Yeah.
But those of us that do would say him. But for
Oh
my
yeah.
Mount Rushmore, it would definitely be Roland and Modest, and then like I said, probably Grimes because he's just done a lot and he's bigger than larger than life. Even though he had a shorter career than most, he was
Mhm.
pretty integral part of that AEW era. You know.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
know some people are going to come on and say some older guys, but when I was coming up, those were the guys that were the legit, that you
Yeah.
that you just wanted to be. And I said Vinny wrestled like a year and a half longer than before I did, but he was always been like a main eventer, where I
Yeah.
haven't always been a main eventer.
Yeah. So tell me now, I mean, you've had an opportunity to be around, and so you have a good eye for talent. So tell me, who are some guys that are coming up now that you think are the ones to kind of watch?
Well, I'm obviously partial. I'm going to say my kids,
Yeah. No, but
Abigail.
I'll tell you, it's just so you don't have to don't have to toot your own horn. I've been around a little while, and I've been a fan for a long time. I saw Titus before he started blowing up. I saw Titus work one of Joe's brewery shows against Johnny Butabi,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and and the thing about, and Johnny's a great worker, like he can work
yeah.
with anybody too. But the thing that I noticed about Titus was even down to like the facial expressions. Like I
Mhm.
saw him do it, you know, he was working from underneath, and the next thing you know, he just hits a drop kick, to kind of turn the tide, right? He hits a drop kick and he turns around and you could see he's laying on the mat, and the face he's giving,
Uh-huh.
like you could just tell, like it just brought something to it. You know what I mean? Like he was
Yeah.
in the character. There's a few guys out there that just get it, and you could tell
Mhm.
he gets it. And
Yeah.
Abigail, I've seen Abigail work probably, I don't even know how many times. Never seen a bad match.
Oh, thank you.
You
Yeah,
know,
they
never
they
seen a
put
bad
in the
match.
work. They put in the work, and they're like I said, they're students. A lot of people say, well, yeah, you're ugly kids, blah blah. They put in the work, and part of that is because my kids, and that's just the way I raised them. But I train all my students that way. They're just the ones who are like, because we lived together for so long, they had easier access to me to
Mm,
drill it in them. Not that I'm the, you train with me, you're going to be a star, but it's like when I can be on them all the time. Like, hey,
mm,
did you watch that match I told you to watch? You better fucking put it on and watch it. And just things like that. I can always be on them, and we're watching wrestling together, and I'm explaining why things are happening, why things are. Uh, that made them really do the pay attention to detail. And when I trained
mm,
them, it was Abigail was first, and then I ran actually my first camp since I was training people again. She was in it, Titus was in it, and then the Pride was in it. Joe Gamble and Dorian Graham
mm,
Mercedes, and we were running like we go 2 days a week and train, and then on the weekends we do a marathon class. We'd be there 8 hours a day. We'd go for 3.5 hours. We'd go eat, come back, and then do another 3.5 hours. And it was like, I know it seemed like repetition for me and boring, but it was basically like fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. And maybe at the end of the class, I'll say, here's 30 minutes, work on whatever bullshit you want to work on. But as anybody who trains me and tell you, the things I focus on is fundamentals, facial expressions, of course, ring placement, timing, and transitions. Everything else is just a move. Like I don't care
mm,
what move you do on your are you cut off. I don't give a shit what it is. Just how do you get to your cutoff? So those are all the things that they had to work and learn, and now they just keep applying it. And every time they have a match, they send it to me, and we still critique it to this day. Or like Titus wrestled Ray Hortus, and then after he wrestled about an hour later, he messaged me, "Hey, so what'd you think?" And then I blew him up. I lit him up, not lit him up, but I told him what I thought, what he needs to work
mm,
on, and whatever. Abigail's the same
mm,
way. I'm at the shows with her more now because she's like we go to Oregon together, and she's local, so we do a lot
mm,
of the shows together. So I tell her right after, so
mm.
they really don't have a chance to not do what I'm asking them to do, and get better.
Yeah.
And when they see it work, they see it work. But back on your question, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, that's great. Who are some, so your kids definitely, like I said, I don't want to, you don't have to toot your own horn. They are very good. Who
Yeah,
else do you think, other than your kids, would be people that you should watch right
there's
now?
a lot of youngsters around in the area that all possess some good qualities. There's obviously things I think they need to work on, and I don't know. Um, I don't want to pick on their schools or whatever, but it's just sometimes they're not getting taught, And I as a trainer, my job is to tell you, and this is the way when I coach anything, I'll tell you one thing you're doing right, and then I'll tell you four things you're doing wrong, because I don't want to
Hmm.
bury you until you're not doing nothing right. But there's some stuff we got to work on, and I think a lot of
Sure.
times trainers are just telling their kids how great the match was. Oh, you
Hmm.
did this, and then they don't pick on those small things. And Titus will tell you, even when I coach him, there's a picture we have where he was in the newspaper. He was probably like 12 years old, maybe even younger than that, and he's catching a pass, right? And he looks over, he looks at the camera, and the camera catches him looking at the camera while he's catching the ball. And of course, everybody's, oh, Tyson the paper, and I lit him up. Why is your fucking eyes off the ball? So
Hmm.
he always tells everybody that story, like, that's the thing I picked on you. Why is your eyes off the ball? You could have dropped the ball because you weren't looking at it. So those are the things I always pick on to them. I said that third form he did was weak. That's awful.
Hmm.
And then they'll try to make it better. But with the young talent today, there's a lot of them, I think, and I guess I'm partial because I always work on the small things. But from the West Coast would be Charlie. Charlie's really good.
Hmm.
Uh, a little undersized, but he can't do nothing about it. But he's good, man. Charlie's really really good. Kind of indie-rific, but he's just a solid worker, man. Once he learns how to
Hmm.
cut promos, kid's gonna be something special. Jaya Jewel, I really like Jaya a lot. I've been using him for about a year and a half on my lucha shows
Yeah.
and on my dojo shows.
The crazy Cajun, right?
Yeah, the crazy, and he's with
I
West Coast now, so Vinny's fixing him, and he's getting way better. You
Dude,
know,
he's another one that I saw him at a Next Level Pro show, and he walked in there, and it was just like he again the facial expressions is like he's ready made for TV. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah. I just
Yeah,
tell him, man, once you figure out how to work out and get bigger,
yeah,
because he's a little skinnier right now, but I guess kind of works
yeah.
towards his gimmick. But he's
I saw him on Saturday, and I got to tell you, he looks a little bit thicker than he did before. He looks like he's getting a little bit of size on him.
I hope so, because not only will it get him more bookings, but it'll protect his body. You know, when you're really
Yeah,
small and skinny, it takes the wear and tear on you.
yeah,
Another, like, one of the guys I use a lot too is JJM or JMM. I always call him JJM, but
yeah,
JMM.
y-
I love
yeah,
JJM. He was actually with us on the Ohio thing. He's one of my guys that I just use all the time. He's a great worker, good charisma. A little snug ski though. Like, he blasted
yeah.
me in the chest with that kick that made my nose bleed this weekend. But he's a good, reliable person that he has. I know he's one of those few guys that like definitely has my back. Like, when
Hmm.
he had to cancel a booking on me, and like he felt so bad, but he double booked himself. He said, "Is it okay if I said, "Bro, don't even. Is it okay? Do your thing. Don't trip, man. Just make it the next
Hmm.
show." So he's one of those good-hearted guys that I trust. You know.
Hmm.
Another kid, two kids I've been working with at Next Level a lot is Low Devereaux and Reese the Beast or Blacklight. Kind
Hmm.
of working with them for a while, and on Tuesdays I go help run Next Level class, and I've been really working with them a lot. And they're hungry. They're really really hungry,
Yeah.
and they're trying to get better. You know.
Dude, Low Devereaux, I like him a lot.
Yeah.
I like him a
He's
lot. I've been on a
got a
couple
lot of
shows with
upside.
him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've been on a couple shows with him. Man, he's figured out his gimmick. It's going pretty well. Like
Yeah.
I've seen him kind of figure it out over the last course of time, and
Yeah.
he really knows his. He's a good one. Another one that's a little undersized, but like he's
Yeah.
got it. He's entertaining.
That's one of the things that I told him. Like, him and Reese the Beast and JT, um,
Mhm.
from West JT Thorne, another pretty solid kid from West Coast. He's like their first graduate.
Mhm.
They had a 6-man with me, Gamble, and Titus at the Dojo show. And
Mhm.
Low came out. They were dancing, doing their thing, and man, they did like 3 laps, and we're doing all this bullshit. And got in the ring, and I told her, if you tell them they're fucking around too much, and I'm getting pissed. And then you see their eyes get big, and then they settle down. But I told Low, look at you and look at me, look at you and look
Mhm.
at Titus, you should be terrified to be in that ring with us. You shouldn't
Mhm.
be fucking dancing and getting your little gimmick in. You should be terrified. Like, that whole match should have been you not wanting to get in the ring and making the other
Mhm.
guys going. I said, that's how you work psychology. That's how you work. So every time you come in, you just he and then we'll no sell you and get the fuck out. So I was trying to explain to
Mhm.
him those little things, but he's one of those guys that, like, he's so into what he's doing, he forgets that there's certain psychologies that you have to follow. Like, they came out and did a couple laps, and I told them, "Why did you guys do 3 laps?" So what's your angle about, like, what's your goal when you get out there? And they're like, "Well, to get over and be hated." I go, "Yeah, you did that 30 seconds walking in, so you
Mhm.
keep doing that. You're not going to get them to hate you anymore by
Right.
telling them they're stupid. You got to get in the ring and make them hate you a different way." So then they
Sure.
got it. I think a lot of this, and another one is, before I forget, Prince Gabriel from West, or I'm sorry, Best of West.
Yeah, he's good too.
He's a
Yeah.
good kid. Um, but a lot of these young guys, that they get so into playing their gimmick, they forget that there's a psychology on everything, and what you do affects me.
Mhm.
And if you're not, like, if I'm this big badass, like, if Low Devereaux is working Sin, he should be terrified and not want to get in the ring at all. He shouldn't be dancing and excited to get to the fucking ring and get his ass kicked.
Right.
So there's a lot of small things you guys got to figure out, and you have to work on, but they need people telling them that all the time. And like I said, a lot of
Mhm.
times they go to shows and they're working their another student, or they're working somebody else that's green, and they're not going to
Mhm.
learn that way. I always tell them,
Right.
you guys got to go to these shows and say, hey, I love this booking, but who am I working? If you're working some other guy that's been wrestling 2 months, it's not going to be beneficial to you. You gotta want to work up. You gotta want to work better people.
Mhm.
Another kid that's really good too is what's his name? Guapo from SPW. He's a little lucha kid.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's really solid. And then Mike Hayashi has a kid named Santino. That's a lucha kid. It's pretty good. It's pretty solid. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot out there. God, what's the kid's name from PCW? The big black kid. Um,
I don't know.
oh my God, I forget his name. God, this dude's
OC
about
OC OC Hayes, is that his name?
no. It's like something or other. It's not OC Hayes, but it's I forget what it is. But he's really tall. He was on the AEW when they came through.
Hmm.
Big tall kid, fucking chisel like a freaking just like like a bodybuilder. Great athlete, good attitude. I worked him a little bit at one of the SPW camps. He's another kid that I would really wish I could see more of, but I don't go to PCW and SPW very often. So, but he's another
Hmm.
kid that I think needs to get out and do more things. He's definitely has a lot of upside.
Nah,
There
man.
needs to be I think the problem with a lot of the NorCal scene, not just the shit on NorCal scene, but everybody wants NorCal to grow, but nobody wants to work together.
Yeah.
And when I say work together, it's not just I'll book one of your guys if you book me and my guy. It's like we have to just let these guys go work other places. Like I was telling the next level kids, Justin, the owner, his goal is to get you trained so you're working everywhere in the country, not just staying here. Me as a
Hmm.
trainer, like when I train my guys, of course I want them to wrestle for me. But if they have a chance to go do GCW or Gorilla or something, go do that.
Yeah.
Go do
Yeah.
those things. My company's going to be here no matter what. You guys got to grow and expand because when you get your name out there, then it gets my name out there. Like every time Titus goes somewhere, he has the ugly dojo shirt on, and they always ask him, "What is that?" He's always my dad's school.
Hmm.
So people will message me,
Hmm.
ask where I'm training at, and how much I charge and all that shit like that. Even though I'm not running a school right now, but so yeah, I mean it's about getting your guys out there, and I think a lot of guys try to hoard their talent, and you got to get these guys out. I've heard people say, well, "You can't work for that company," like what the fuck?
Hmm.
Like, was your goal to be work matches for this guy or to wrestle everywhere? So
Hmm.
I always tell my guys like when I was running SPW and Roland hated me. He was using a lot of my talent. Crypto was going over there, and Adam and those guys were going over there. So he was using a lot of my talent on his shows. And I told him, go
Hmm.
ahead. Like it's more work for me. It's more work you get, which makes me look better.
Yeah.
So I don't like that mentality of some of the guys around here are you can't work there, you can't work there. It doesn't matter. It's your talent, your name getting out there. Who wouldn't want like I tell everybody, you want to book Titus and Abigail, go ahead. They're gonna steal your show. So it makes me look better. Like
Right.
well, put them in match one. I don't care. They're gonna do what they do and they're gonna get over. So
Right.
do it. Take them.
Man.
And not enough people have that mentality though.
Yeah. So tell me now, your kids, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was uh, your daughter Abigail is transgender.
Mhm.
And when is the first indication that you had as a father that Abigail was transgender?
Well, the the first time anything of this came up was a couple years ago, and I remember she had called me. She was staying with her mom for a while, and at this point she was already like I want to say 20 or something, but she was over there, and she asked me to come over. We're getting ready to go to a show, and we're driving to Oregon, and we're getting ready to go to a show. So I go there to pick her up, and her mom's sitting on the couch, and I think one of the aunts is there, and Salem's there, and Bishop's there, and it was like felt like a fucking intervention, So I walk in, I'm like, hey, what's going on, everybody? And then they're like, oh well, her mom's like, hey, well, tell him. And so Salem tells me, well, I just want to let you know that I'm she's not bisexual. And I
Hmm.
was like, okay, well, we got to get on the road, so get your shit, let's go. Like, and then of course her mom's like, did you hear what she said? Or you hear what because at this time she was still going as Roman. I was like, yeah, she's bisexual. What the fuck do I care? I don't care who Titus is sleeping with. What do I care?
Yeah.
That's none of my business, as long as they're not doing nothing
Right.
illegal. So I mean, we just went on the road and we just didn't talk about it much. Like we didn't really say much about it. It was just not a big deal. And then like as the months progressed, she kind of was figuring out, well, maybe I'm non-binary, and she was trying to figure out all these emotions and these things that were happening to her. And when
Hmm.
she finally decided she was transgender, I was just like, okay, so now you need to educate me because I kind of know some stereotypical stuff and the stuff that's in the media, but I don't know exactly what all this means. So she kind
Hmm.
of, smartened me up to all that, all the stuff that goes along with being transgender. So it was never a thing about like I mean, just I kind of try to prepare her for being transgender in the wrestling business, but
Hmm.
other than that, I was just kind of like, well, I mean, do what you're gonna do. That's on you. Like you're still my kid either way. Like
Right.
I don't care what your preference is. You know, just tell me
Hmm.
what I need to call you so you're not offended and I don't disrespect you, and we'll go from there. But yeah, it was the stuff that was the issue was her emotionally handling it because she was just so into like so everybody would say the wrong thing because they didn't understand, they didn't get it, they didn't like we have coaches that hadn't seen her since she was played football, so they'd say hey Roman or and stuff, and she would get offended right away because she didn't understand that they still see her as that kid they've coached for 10 years, and they
Yeah.
don't not trying to be disrespectful, so she would get really offended, really hurt, it would really bother her, and kind of through time she kind of was like, yeah, you're right, people aren't necessarily trying to offend me, sometimes people just say the wrong thing, and she kind of became more cool with it, and and not it's not so much of a deal anymore, but I see it now where people misgender her, and I try to, I don't want to say nothing to go off on somebody, but I see her just being able to deal with it now and not take it to heart so much, because she's growing
Hmm.
and she's happy
Yeah.
with who she is. So I just told her
Well,
that, if you're going to
I'm,
be a transgender in the wrestling world, what you have to understand is that people, the wrestling world and gimmicks is behind society years, So if you're going to
mhm.
come out and you're going to, be your feminine self, people are going to think that you're playing gay. They're
Mhm.
not going to understand that you're really transgender. It's who you are, that you're just a girl wrestler in the ring. They're going to say, oh, you faggot and you all this stuff like that, which has happened to her before. But I told her, like, traditionally, people who've played gay characters, and a lot of people don't understand there's a difference between gay and being transgender. They
Yeah.
don't see the difference in it. They're gonna think that it's a spoof because that gay character has always been a spoof in pro wrestling. When Adrian
Right.
Adonis did it, people always made fun of it. That's the way it's been. So people are going to naturally assume that that's what you're doing, not understand because they don't know who you are outside of the ring. You know,
Right.
so at first it was a little struggle for her, but she, if you're going to be from that community, the wrestling world is the perfect place to be that in because there's so many people from that community, and then nobody that I've came across has an issue with it at all.
Yeah.
There's whole shows that are dedicated to that community, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful thing, So she's really accepted in the wrestling world, and the fans love her, and she's having a great time. So now that she's so comfortable, she's just excelling. Like her promo skills are ridiculous. She buried me in a promo in Oregon a couple weekends ago, but she's really good at what she does, and she's really comfortable now. And now we're trying to take the next step to get her to over to the next bump. She took about I'm going to say close to a year off when she earlier. Um, not so much off, but it wasn't working many shows when she was starting the transition. She missed a lot of shows. She was actually supposed to work for West Coast before Titus was. They wanted her
Mm.
before Titus, but she had taken time off, so they used Titus instead. And then he blew up. But so she's gonna get her run. She's like I said, she's every time people let her talk, they're oh my gosh, she's so great on the mic, and she's a theater kid. She's always been into that stuff, so she's really great on the mic, and her work rate is incredible. Like you know. I wish her conditioning was better because just like myself, you get gas in the ring, your matches suffer, but she's definitely coming into her own.
Yeah. Yeah. That's uh, one of the things that you said. You mentioned that sometimes people who remember her back when she was a little kid, similarly, I remember when Sheik transitioned,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember telling her at the beginning, I said, listen, I may call you he. I just want to let
Mm-hmm.
you know the only reason for that is because for the bulk of the time that we were like hanging out, you were a he. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's like
Yeah.
it's not I'm not being I'm not trying to offend you. I'm not used to you being she yet. You know what I mean? It's going
Yeah.
to take me a minute.
Take
And
time. Yeah.
yeah, and now it's like I hardly remember it. I ran across a Facebook post of something she posted, and it was something like it was a promo she cut at one of my shows where she was like, my she said, "What do you mean I'm not famous? My chest hair has its own Facebook page." You know what I mean? Like something like that. And it
Yeah.
was just I
Yeah.
just remember back in that day, so it's pretty awesome. But so now, what does it mean to you as a wrestling trainer, as a coach, all of those things? What does it mean to you to have your kids kind of following in your footsteps?
Honestly, to me, it means everything. Like, when me and their mom, even before that, but they've always kind of followed what I was doing. And, I was coaching football before they started playing, obviously. And then they both started playing and then took to it and they loved it, Then they got into rugby a little bit. But just coaching them in football. And then, for a while, Salem was really into working out. And Titus obviously got really into working out. When Salem moved away to live with her mom for a bit, of course, I wasn't there every day doing those things with her. So she kind of lost interest. But yeah, just when they started wanting to wrestle, at first I was kind of like, you know what, I really would rather have you guys go to college, something to fall back on.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't want you guys to wrestle. But then, here I am with the freaking master's degree and I don't even use it. So like, I'd kind of be a hypocrite if I, had told them that, or I wanted them to do like the military or something to have something to fall back on, because I've generally always had two jobs to work. I've always worked two jobs because I've had to
Mm-hmm.
make money for my, for my kids. So I didn't want them to have that life, to have to work, live check to check and do all that. So I was telling him, you got to go to school, go to the military, do something. But here I am. I, got a college degree. I went to the military and I'm still living check to check. So I kind of, when they started wanting to do it, I was like, okay, this is fine. But just like everything else we've done, if you're going to do this, we're going to go 100%. And you're going to be the best you can at it. And I just told them they both need to understand that, just like when I coached them in football, that what this means with me training you is that because you live with me, you don't get time off. Like, you're not going to be sick. When it's time to train, it's time to train. And I'm going to be on your ass for everything, because you're going to have every opportunity to do something big, if, and it kind of in a selfish way, I told him, if you don't make it, it's not because you weren't trained right. you know, it's not
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't put in the work, you didn't put in the work. It's for some other circumstance. I said, so you be ready for it, because I'm not going to take it easy on you. You're a student of mine. When we go to training, you're my student. You're not my kid. And that's the way it was. We condition them. We'd work them hard in the ring. And like I said, it was just all the time. And they're kind of ingrained that in them now. Like, they're so cerebral when they do their matches, and when they watch them later, when they plan them out, they're, which I don't like planning out anyways, but they're just on it now, and they just really understand. They're students. They're students of the game, and they just so hungry to get better all the time. That's what I really value, because that's how I am. Like,
Yeah.
I go to some of these shows, and if somebody's doing a training seminar, I'll sit and watch, because I want to know what this guy's doing, what he's training people on. I want to see
Mm-hmm.
what he's doing. So when I train people, I can get better. I sat backstage at a Defy show and I was listening to Davey Richards and Aleister Black call a match. And I was just sitting there going, "Oh my God, these guys are freaking the smartest guys I've ever met in the business." And I just sat there, and I'm just, I'm close to 50 years old at the time, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, man, there's just so much more I need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much more I need to
Mm-hmm.
learn. But I just sat
Yeah.
there, and those things they were talking about, I talked to Davey after, and I, why'd you do this? And he told me, and I just make mental notes, and I'm like, all right. So I go back and tell the kids, like, hey,
Yeah.
maybe change it this way, change it this way, do it this way, and they see that I keep working, like, I watch so much indie wrestling right now. I have my favorite
Mm-hmm.
guys that I watch wrestling, and then I try to study, because I can go back and tell them to do this. You need to do this, and like when I work with the next level kids, I'll tell them something. I'll give them a move, and they've never seen it before, but it's because nobody does it. I did it years ago, but people are all into leg slapping and doing this flippy shit. I'll do something that's so simple, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, that's genius!" I'm like, no, it's just a basic move, man. Like
Yeah.
when we were going over cutoffs, everybody comes up with this crazy old thing, and I told Titus, "You throw a great cutoff, just throw that." And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, "What?" Yeah, just somebody jumps, just throw a drop kick at him, and he does the best drop kick I've ever seen in my life. And
Mm-hmm.
it's always a cutoff or something, and people
Mm-hmm.
always pop for it, because it looks pretty and it's a simple, basic move. So I
Mm-hmm.
always go try to learn and feedback and give them those little tidbits, and then watch them just do it, and watch them
Yeah.
get better.
Man. Yeah. That's awesome. So tell me now, you have a good relationship with their mom?
Yeah, obviously when it first happened, we didn't. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I guess that's each of them have their own story to tell with her. Bishop's really close with her. My youngest adores his mom. Um,
Mm-hmm.
her and Salem get along really. I think when when we first split up and got separated, Titus chose to live with me.
Mm,
And so I think she held a little bit of resentment towards that at first,
mm, mm,
and was mad. I mean, it was all directed towards me, and Titus was
mm,
my little freaking shadow. Like everywhere I went, Titus was with me. At this time, he wasn't playing high school football. He was playing youth. He'd go to the games with me on
mm,
Friday nights. He was just with me all the time, go to wrestling shows with me, and did everything with me, So he was always like my little sidekick. And then, when I had Bishop and Salem on the weekends as well. But him and her aren't so close as they used to. I don't like to say too much about it because she's a great woman. Like I said, me and her had our issues, and we're really good friends now. I actually talked to her today.
mm,
She's a great woman, and she's probably helped me out more than anybody else in the last 7 or 8 years. She's been my rock. We have our differences, but I know that if I broke down on the side of the road, she'd come get me in a second.
mm,
If I needed anything, she'd be there for me in a second, as well as I do the same for her. Um,
mm,
Whatever problems they had, it's between them. It's pretty much in the past because they're both older now. Whatever
mm,
resentment there, it isn't. She loves her kids though. You know,
mm,
I know,
mm.
like, 'cause I know Bishop adores. I know Salem loves her to death, and I know Titus loves her too. He's just a little bit of a more of a knucklehead, and he's like me, set in his ways, and Titus doesn't like a lot of people. He's friendly with
Mm,
everybody, but he doesn't put a lot of people into a circle.
mm,
So just like with our family alone, like he comes to the family functions and stuff when he's free, but he doesn't generally like associate with a lot of people. He has his couple friends, and then I've always tried to tell both of them you need to have a separate life outside of wrestling, and they try to
yeah.
stick to that. They have their own group of friends outside, and but like I said, he's doing some stuff right now where he had to have blood work done and some stuff done, and she helped him with it, and so there, the fences are mended. It's like I said, it's all in the past. Titus is Titus, and he's so focused on other things right now that drama is the least of his worries. He's so
Yeah.
focused on getting where he needs to be. But
Yeah.
she's a good woman. I mean, like I said, we've had our differences where we hated each other and wished each other dead and things like that with the court, and went to court. I got custody of the kids, and we worked things out, and it just, like I said, she's a good woman. She's a good friend, and I won't say nothing bad about her because, like I said, there was a time where yes, I wouldn't say nothing good about her. One thing though is I never talked bad about her in front of the kids.
Mm,
Because like I told them, that's your mom, so you need to respect her. And if I'm calling her the B word and all these things, then they're going to think that that's okay. So I've never
yeah.
really been disrespectful. We've talked about stuff that they've had with her, but I don't really do those things, because it's just, that's the end of the day, that's their mom, and
Yeah.
they need to respect her, even if they don't like her, but I'm not saying they don't like her, but you know what I'm saying? Like they
Correct.
need to respect her,
Yeah.
so it's came a long way, but I definitely tell everybody that, like, when I was wrestling, um, she was definitely my partner in the whole thing. Like she ran all the paperwork I had to do. She ran the snack bar for me. She definitely allowed me to go to shows and do things. Allowed me to have my wrestling school at the house when I had to, and uh, she was really, really a really good woman, a really good partner. When we split, I was really doing my wrestling thing, and I think she was just so happy to be out of that, have that responsibility. She kind of did her own thing, and
Mm,
I was always doing my wrestling business and doing all the other things I was doing. So she kind of went out and lived her life a bit, and um, I don't know. Like I said, I really I don't know how to say it, but she just kind of lost. We've lost a lot with each other at that time, where we just hated each other, and I hated everything she did, and she hated everything I did, and she hated wrestling, and I hated her life. And at one point, it was kind of like we were just like, yeah, it's so stupid that we're acting like that. Just end of the
yeah.
day, we have to be here because of the kids, and we've worked with each other on a lot of things, and it's been a blessing these last few years. And a lot of it has
Yeah.
to do with Bishop because of Bishop.
Hmm. So has that gone the other way too? Have you had your differences with the kids too, or has it been mainly, have they always
No,
been kind of with you?
not. I mean, I honestly couldn't say nothing. Like, there was the only thing I can remotely say that there was any kind of a even close to a problem was Salem was dating this girl, this individual. She's transgender as well, so I forget what her pronouns are, but I'll just say an individual, and it really wasn't a good person. We could all see it,
Mm,
and Salem couldn't because she
mm,
was in love. And the person was really bringing Salem down, like just bringing her down to a bad point, where Salem believed a lot of things that weren't true. And it just got, to a point where her head was getting filled with stuff. And the girl made a comment about me, and Bishop told me, or the person made a comment about me and told me. And I was like, that person is never allowed in my house again. I don't want to see her around. Don't ever bring her here again. She's not allowed. And Salem then says, well, if she's not welcoming her, I'm not. And I'm like, okay. It's called tough love. If you're going to pick her over your family, then do it. And I'm not saying you can't come over here, but I don't want her around here. She's disrespecting me in front of my kids. You should stand up for me, And so she ended up living in her car for a while, struggling. And I'd always help her out when I could. But, she went through some stuff, and it was kind of like a tough love thing. I think Salem ended up seeing where the writing was on the wall and ended up making better decisions. And now she's with a person that's an amazing human being. His name's Lee, and totally they have a great relationship. And she's doing in a better place now. She's motivated. She wants to do things. But it was never like, fuck you, dad, or fuck you. It was never nothing like that. It was just kind of like, I got done dealing with this other person, and I had welcomed him in my home a lot, and said, you're welcome to stay here, give me the money and stuff, and this is how I get repaid. So I was just like, yeah, I'm done. And it lasted a couple months, and then, it was all over. And, like to this day, like it was a learning experience for all of us, and Salem always knows that whenever it comes down to it, I have her back, and just one of those things where I was just like, I can't mentally do this anymore, keep giving to somebody who doesn't even respect me. And like I said, it's all over. And like there was never a thing where we hated each other. I think she told me, I'm gonna not get booked anywhere you are. And at this time I booked her on Lucha Extreme. And I said, okay. So I took her off the show. I'm like, you don't want to be on any shows I am. So I took her off. And we didn't talk for like 2 weeks, and then it was all over, But like I said, that other than that, I can't really say anything negative. Like, me and Titus are, best friends really, and Bishop too. Like me and Bishop, I don't see him as much because him and his mom moved across town to the Arden area. But all of us were like, I go on the road with Salem all the time, and if I'm not on the road with Titus, we're texting and messaging, and Bishop's usually here or I'm over at his house. So it's I really don't have anything bad to say. Even like if we do disagree on something, it's never nothing too crazy, because I just know at the end of the day, like a disagreement is never something to have heat for, where it's gonna take time away from your family. Like when I learned this I had this story, really haven't told yet because it always brings emotional. But Virgil, I've always looked at him as a son to me. He was wrestling in the backyard, and then he started training with me, and he ran this show, and he booked the kids on there, or he booked Titus. I think Salem wasn't wrestling at the time; she had taken her time off, and he booked Titus on there. And Titus, it was his first show in Sac, and man, he brought everybody. Like there was like 9 or 10 football players there. All of our family came, and we had so many people there to watch his first match. And he was so excited. We got to the building. We were all happy, all excited. I think I was working actually Joe Del Sol on that show. And we get there, and Virgil's like, "Oh yeah, I had to change the match." I'm like, "What do you mean you had to change it? Who's in it now?" He's like, "Well, I didn't book Titus." What the fuck you mean you didn't book Titus? Dude, everybody's here. We have like 30 people here to see him wrestle. They've already bought tickets and they're ready to rock. And he's like, "Well, we had to change. I do this." And I was like, "You couldn't have called me and told me that you were gonna do this. Like we could have told our family not to come. We had family from out of town coming in." And he was just like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, just the way I had to do it." And I said, "Fuck you, dude. This is bullshit." And then like I walked away from him, and we didn't talk anymore. And the night he gave my envelope, and I left. And man, no shit. 2 weeks later, he passed away. So the last thing I told Virgil was "fuck you," and it just, man, it always just, man, rips my heart out. That was our last conversation. And it bugged me for a long time. Even his ex-wife his wife Kathy asked me to do the eulogy there, and I did it and told a great story about him and Hayashi. But man, it just ripped me apart for years, because that was just a conversation me and him had. So I was thinking like, nobody knows. It was just, but I held all that weight. And then I remember I was talking to Hayashi, and Hayashi told me, he goes, "Yeah, Virgil said you cussed him out that day." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Bro, he forgave you right when you said it." And it just it's just the guy Virgil was, just a nice guy. But that right there, man, just weighed so much on me, and that's one of the ways I learned, like, you can't have heat with people, man, because they could be gone so quick.
Mm-hmm.
So if you harbor this hate and this animosity over stupid things, and I mean, and in my mind, I was right. You don't do that to me. Like, I gave you this opportunity in this business. I'm working for you for cheap, and you're gonna cancel my son's match, for somebody else. Like, where's the respect? That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
But I didn't have to come at him that way. I was just my ego talking. But the fact that I knew he forgave me for that meant a lot. And it's like I said, it's in the past, and that was when I learned, like, dude, like, you know, you just can't have this heat over stupid things with people you love. And I mean, our
Yeah.
story goes way deeper with me and him, with me and Verge, because there was a time when he was training with me, and he was living down Oak Park area somewhere. He was riding his bike to training, and he went to like 99-cent store, got some food, and went to the or Big Lots or something to buy some more food. He came out, his bike was gone, had groceries on it and everything. Somebody stole it. So he came back
Mm.
and he tell me, I gotta quit. I can't train anymore because I lost my, I don't have no food to eat. I lost my bike and I don't know what I'm. So I said, bro, don't trip, man. Get in the car. So I went to the car, took him to Rayleigh's, and he got a bunch. I said, get whatever you need, get any amount of food you need. And of course, I kept having to throw shit in the car because he didn't want to get nothing from me. But I said, you need a ride to practice. I'll have me or somebody will pick you up. So for about 3 months, we picked him up, brought him to and from practice, and uh, later on down the road, I sold him my ring, and he stopped paying for it. Like, he missed like two payments, and at this point, it was after my accident, so I didn't have any money. That's why I sold the ring in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I was living, like, I was selling DVDs and trying to make money just to buy food for me and Titus and stuff. And I told him, bro, like, you owe me a lot of money, and I have nothing. I have no food in my house right now, bro. Like, I have nothing. You owe me a lot of money. And I said, dude, I'm gonna tell you this, man, Virgil, like, you're really fucking me over, dude. Like, you owe me, like, it was like $800 or something like that. And he hung up the phone on me, and I was just livid. I was just pissed off. And then I came home the next day, and there's an ice chest in front of my house with $300 and then a bunch of food that
Mm.
he paid for. And he said, hey, boss, we take care of each other. And I was like, so I called him to apologize, but that's just the kind of guy Virgil was, man. And so that's why, like, it just ripped my heart out that was our last conversation. And I just said, that's never going to happen again, where I'm going to have heat with
Mm.
somebody over something stupid, and then they pass away, and
Yeah.
so I
That's
go ahead.
interesting. You bring that up because, you have those moments where, like I asked you earlier, if you could get 5 minutes alone with, either dad right now, what would you say? It's because you never know when that last conversation is going to come. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
And you
definitely.
never know. It could be any time.
Yeah, definitely.
Virgil was one of those guys that nobody, like, your story was the first story of anyone I've ever heard who gotten mad at him. Like, he's just, he's such a good guy. And like you said, a good, kind hearted guy. Um, you mentioned an accident. What happened?
Uh, once it was 2012. I had just gotten a job in Galt working at a care home. I was driving back, and I come up on this construction zone, and all of a sudden traffic stops, dead stop. So I put on the brakes slow, and I look over. A car goes on the side of me on the shoulder, and then next thing I know, I hear a honk, and then boom, the semi rear-ended me.
Oh,
It was
dude.
one of those ones that carry other cars,
Mm,
so
yeah.
like a car transporter hit
Hmm.
me, and it flipped me up onto the SUV in front of me, and I was basically hanging upside down, and freaking airbag came out, punched me in the face with it, and
Oh,
knocked me out. And I
geez.
remember I was just hanging there upside down, and then I guess these people next to me were first responders, so they ran over and they were talking to me, and I'm just like looking over, like, not knowing what the hell's going on. Like, I don't even remember that part that the lady was telling me. So next thing I remember, they're holding my head against the rest on the headrest, and they're like, "Okay, the ambulance is coming," and blah blah. And I remember they ended up having to cut like side of the car off, and to get me out and everything, and took me to the hospital. And I spent, I think, 2 days one day in the trauma unit, and a couple days in recovery. And then I was in the hospital for about a week. But I had two ruptured discs in my neck, compressed one in my underneath the, like, L4, I think, or L5, and then three slip discs in my low back. Besides the concussion and the fucking scrapes and cuts and all that stuff, my back was just thrashed. I was just so bad. Um, So I was
What
in
did
the
you do
hospital
for
for a while.
what did you do for aftercare? Did you end up having to get injections? You didn't do a surgery, right?
No, they did the discogram on it, and then he
Mm.
told me from that, he's like, we can cut your neck. He's like, but here's the thing. He's like, you're probably gonna, you're definitely gonna lose range of motion. He's
Yeah,
like, and the pain may not go away. He's like, you're definitely gonna
yeah,
lose range of motion, but the pain may not go away. He's like, your back, I won't cut into your back. He's like, if we cut into your back, you'll never wrestle again. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
was like, okay, and he's like, well, he's like, before we go there, this is what I remember because my wife freaked out. He's like, but before we go there, he's like, we have to just we'll get you walking again. And I was like, what do you
hmm
mean? He's like, well, we have to stand you up and see if you can walk and do all this other stuff like that. And I was like, okay. And I guess when that first happened, like I remember them kind of tapping my toe with the little pin gimmick, and there wasn't no movement. Like I don't
yeah,
remember. I didn't feel it. So they thought there was a lot of spine damage, and like, it was a question if I was even going to walk or walk correctly again. So I remember telling the doctor, this is my wife tells the story too. The doctor's like, yeah, she's like, you may not even wrestle again. And I say, hey, doctor, it's not a question of if I wrestle, it's when I wrestle. I said, so I'm going to
yeah,
wrestle again. Like I'm going to be in the ring again. So, after a week and a half in there, like I remember a bunch of the wrestlers came down. I told my wife, I don't want the kids here. I don't want the kids to see me like this. And spent a little bit of time in there, and then came home, had the little neck brace on. I remember came home and Titus was crying because he saw me in the neck brace and stuff. And, I got up right away and I said, all right, let's take a walk. And we just walked around the block and stuff and just tried to show them that I wasn't hurt, but it was rough, man. It was rough. And when I was in there, they put me in the CAT scan thing and realized I was fucking claustrophobic because I'd never been in that before. And I freaked out,
yeah.
and they had to inject me with Valium or whatever, and or I think it was Valium or Xanax is what it was. And then I found out that I had diabetes. I mean, there's so much stuff. I was in there. I was 285 when they weighed me.
Wow.
I was a big fat guy. I have a picture that I was standing there with doing my pose, and man, I was just so fat. I didn't
Mm.
realize how bad I got. So I made a
Yeah.
conscious effort to get back in shape and get healthy again. And in 9 months, I started wrestling again.
Oh man, you went back 9 months after that.
Yeah,
Did you end
I
up?
went.
So let me real quick ask you. The injury attorney has to ask me. Did you end up getting representation for that?
Yeah, I went through. I forgot what the name was, but I ended up getting a really big settlement for it. And I
Okay.
remember right when it happened, like the next week when I got home, the trucking company's insurance called me, wanted to meet to go over a settlement.
Yeah.
And I remember my wife telling me, no, don't meet with them. We talked to
Yeah.
an attorney first. So then we talked to one, and yeah, he ended up getting me this a pretty good amount of money. Let's say a pretty good amount
Okay.
of money. And it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
way more. I mean, covered all my medical and covered all my medical, and it was really good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
I
Well.
didn't I didn't have having a job for like 2 years because of it.
Yeah.
Now,
Wow.
had that been now, I would have spent my money differently. But,
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, man. That's a rough one, man. 2012. I was just
yeah.
sitting there. I'm like, you didn't call me, jerk. Jeez. I had just end of 2012 is when I became an attorney. So it's okay. It's
Oh,
okay. I won't make you.
well, I remember
I won't make you feel bad.
when I first wrestled, I went up to Oregon just to visit my friends because I hadn't seen them in a while, and I wanted just to visit them. And at this point, I hadn't got my settlement yet, so I was like,
Mm.
man, I mean, I didn't have money at all. Like my disability ran out because it was it was
It's
on the
2 years
last.
temporary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just no money. I'm telling my attorney, I got to settle, bro. I have no money, man. I got to make some
Mhm.
fucking money, dude. Like, so I go up to Oregon, drive right up with a couple people, and I'm just visiting, and they're like, hey, how's it going? We're talking bullshit, and then they're like, hey, so when are you gonna wrestle again? And I was like, well, if nobody knows, I can wrestle tonight. They're like, really? So I was like, yeah. They go, well, we have a spot open, and I was like, okay, shit, what's it doing? What's the payout? And this is Grappler was telling me, and they tell me what the payout was. I was like, oh, that's cool. I have a little bit extra money, and I have my mask and stuff, so I wear my chupacabra mask, and I end up doing a 5-man cage match or 10 person cage match. As they called me Sinister, and I was like, all right. So I did this cage match, and after that, Grappler was like, hey, we're starting this company up with Roddy Piper. You want to be involved? And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, what's the payout? And he's telling me, and he's like, well, Roddy needs like a bully because he was doing the anti-bullying campaign. And he's like, he needs
Mhm.
somebody to play a bully. And I think you can do it. I was like, well, of course I can. So then he brought me up for that, and then that was history after that.
Yeah.
Started working
Jeez.
there regularly, then I started making a living just wrestling.
Well, I can tell you, man, as a personal injury attorney, if I had ever heard that one of my clients went and pro wrestled while I was trying to get him a settlement, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, that's what I was telling her. But I was like, hey guys, I can't let anybody know I'm doing this, man, because I got a big settlement coming up that I don't want to risk, you know. And then like a month
Yep.
and a half later is when I finally got my money, you know, and
Yeah.
I paid off all my debt, and you know, yada yada. But bought a new car and did all the stuff I was supposed to do, but I didn't really save any of it. I was happy not working, you know, and
Yeah.
doing my thing. I got kind of stupid with it, you know, and just blew it all away. Took the kids to a football camp and spent like, you know, 6 or 7 grand, and just it was that ridiculous.
Man.
You know.
Yeah, that happens. Unfortunately, I try to tell my clients to, introduce them to a financial planner, give them some names, but they're going to do what they do. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
we've talked about all of these different things. Oh, one more thing I wanted to ask. You mentioned you have a master's degree. What is your master's degree
It's in adult education and training.
in? And why didn't you ever do anything with that?
Well, I originally went to college because I wanted to get my degree in special needs. I wanted to be a teacher of
Mm,
special needs because that's kind of my
mm,
chosen career is working with
mm,
people with disabilities. So I went to University of Phoenix, and you know, I don't know if you call me gullible or whatever, but I just started believing everything they were telling me. So I get my bachelor's degree in psychology because I've always been interested in psychology, and it could transfer over to a teaching degree, especially with the field I work in. And when
mm,
I'm getting ready to take my master's degree or get my credentials, they tell me, yeah, we have this program, but you got to be on campus in Arizona. And I'm like, wait a minute, you guys told me when I signed up, I told you that I wanted to be a teacher for special needs, and you said you guys offer that. They go, yeah, we do, but it's in Arizona. You got to be on the campus there. You can't take it online. So then I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Like
mm,
I, I have a bachelor's degree. I said, this is what I want to do. So we start looking at other things to do, and I actually took like 6 7 months off because I was kind of just done with it. And then I'm like, well, I'll go back and get a teaching degree. So that was the field I picked, was education and training, because I wanted to teach at college and also coach at the college. And so I ended up getting that. And then once I started learning about what is required, I'm like, I really can't do this, man. Like I can't take 6 or 7 months off to intern and not make a living, you know,
mm,
and you know the things they want, courses they do want to give me, like there was like one in the AM and then one at night, and then that was it because there was so many teachers who were learning that they could just do classes online. The on-campus classes, there was few and far between that I was qualified to teach, you know.
mm,
So I just was like, well, you know, I have other skills. I'll go back to work with people with disabilities and do all that until something comes up. And it just kind of nothing came up with it. So I ended up going to the school district and become a paraeducator. And I was making a decent amount of money, and I loved it. You know, working on campus
mm.
where I'm coaching football and working in that population. I was in the classroom, so it was it was cool. So I did that for about almost 10 years, and then about 2 years ago is when I finally left. But yeah, so that's
Mm.
why I really just didn't do it anymore because I was already doing a job I loved. You know,
Yeah. So what are you doing now?
uh, right now I currently work. My overnight job is I work with special needs. I work at a care home. The gentleman I work with sleeps all night, so I basically go there and sleep. So
Mm.
it's like you know I'm not gonna ever quit that job because nobody ever pays you to sleep. You know, so
Yeah.
and then during the day, I do independent living, which I have 6 clients right now, and basically go to each of their houses a couple of hours a week and help them with their living skills. You know, teach them how to cook, clean, when they have to do doctor's appointments, how to take the bus, how to do their budgeting, and all those things that they did. They all live on their own or at a group home. So I just work with them individually to work towards living on their own.
So tell me what it is that you find, why it is that you choose to work with people with special needs.
You know, when I first did it, I was working at a boys ranch in Nevada, working with juveniles and basically thugs and gangbangers. They closed down, so I came back to Sac full time to live here, and I was home with my wife, and we had just had Salem. So I liked being home every night. So I applied for jobs. My sister actually sent a application in for me, and I went in for this interview. I didn't even know what it was for. I just knew that they paid a good amount of money, and they were offering me or had a good the perks, you know, all the retirement, all that. So I went in, did this interview, and they were just telling me. And I said, "Oh, because can you tell me about the position?" And they started telling me, and I'm thinking like, "Man, I don't know. I've never worked with people with special needs. Like, I don't know nothing about this." But I was just like, "Well, but you know, they're paying well, so I'll give it a shot." And then I did it for a while, and it was rough. You know, I didn't understand how the field works, and after doing it for a while, I realized that like I can do work on the weekends and kind of make my own schedule a lot, which helps me for wrestling. It helps me for
Mm.
football. Like if I need to be off Friday night to go to a game, I can do that. You know, if I need to be off to be at practice, I can do that. I can schedule all my stuff right. So it kind of just at first started working into my schedule with football, wrestling, and everything else I was doing, and the pay was pretty solid. You know, and then after a while, you meet certain clients. Like I got this one I work with to this day. I work with him on weekends sometimes, and I'm really close to his mom. Um, he's like family. You know, he's like
Mhm.
I go to his birthday parties and stuff, and we go out of town together. And he's like my little sidekick. You know, like we're boys. Like we're actually like he's really like he's nonverbal and really he can be rough. But I've just known him for so long that we have a bond. Like when I come over, he's generally happy to see me. You know, and then
Mhm.
I'm happy to see him. So when we go, it's more like we're hanging out as friends. You know, and we can
Yeah.
go do things. I can do things with him other people can't. You know, so it's you meet people like that that just change your outlook on everything and make you have this passion for doing it, for helping these individuals that basically don't have a voice for themselves. You know,
Yeah.
they kind of just are like people always tell them what they think is best for them, and then that's what they have to do. But when you have that bond with them and you know things they like and you let them make their own choices, it's rewarding, man. It's really rewarding. And there's always work. There's always work when you need it. Like I'm picking up extra shifts right now because I'm trying to save money for things, and there's always hours available. You know, um,
Mhm.
so that part of it is what keeps me doing it. You know, but I would
Yeah.
rather have the teaching job. It's probably not going to happen. So, and I said I'm
Mm.
making a fair amount of money now. You know, living, but that's what keeps me coming back is working with those specific individuals that you see them grow and advance and. People giving up on them years ago, and now they're actually excelling in their life and doing things that people said they could never do. You know, it's just really eye opening for me. You know, and just it's really so rewarding. You know.
What I find so interesting about you is every aspect of your life that you find meaning in has something to do with coaching. Like,
Yeah.
it's you're a football coach, you're a pro wrestling coach. You're coaching people with special needs on how to live. Talk to me about what it is about coaching that brings so much meaning to your life.
Yeah. I think it's part of it is like just having people do things that they didn't think they could do themselves, like making people believe in themselves or in a system, or just see people do something that they really want to do but was never allowed to do. Or like I
Mhm.
said, when I've coached a guy that's in the NFL, was in the NFL for years. He was easy to coach. He was easy to
Mhm.
coach. You know, like the kid was a phenomenal athlete. And I've coached kids who probably should have never played, and I ended up making them starters because they worked hard and they earned it. You know, but you see them go from a kid who came the first day of practice and couldn't even get his pads on right to by the time he graduates, the guy's in all league. You know,
Yeah.
and that's so rewarding to me when you have faith in a kid who you see something in him that nobody else does, and the kid buys into you, and then he's working hard, and you see the satisfaction that he gets and how it changes his life. You know, like my goal when I took over the program at River City was to have 99 or over 95% of our kids make grades, which we had never even been close to that. And the last year,
Mhm.
I finally got my whole team. I had one kid that didn't make grades, he got hurt, and then he stopped playing. But everybody else on the team made grades. I had two kids 2 years in a row get a D1 scholarship. We've never had that happen in my school's history. And those kids to this day still thank me for it. Their parents thank me for it, and uh, that's the kind of stuff that just to me is just it's you can't put a price on that, because with me coaching I wasn't making hardly anything, but I just
Yeah.
loved it. It was for my school, for my city. It just was just I mean I tell people like I want nothing to do with football now because I spent so much time out of my life, for them to get rid of me just like that after what I think was I had a big impact on our program, doesn't sit well with me. But other than like the players I used to have that coach, now I'll help them out once in a while. Uh, I really would rather not be involved in the football aspect of it. I want to get back into training wrestlers, but it just to this day when I still see old players that they just, hey coach, what's up, man? Give me a hug and show me their kids and stuff, and introduce me to their families, and still like on my birthday they give me shouts out and stuff, and it's just so awesome, man. For that to have to know you've affected so many lives, and that they still thank you for stuff you did for them years ago, is
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And that's the thing is that you never know when something you do is going to affect somebody's life, especially in a coaching position. For all you know, some of those kids, if you weren't around, would have had nobody. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You never know when one day something you say is going to change somebody's life. And I think it's
yeah.
pretty cool that you've kind of dedicated your life. Yeah, maybe you didn't make a lot of money or you haven't made a lot of money. Maybe you are paycheck to paycheck, but I'd say you're a pretty rich man considering what you've done in your life, you know?
Yeah. Like I tell everybody all the time, like is one of my my son Titus had this friend named Austin. Great kid. He had gotten his he had graduated high school early. Of course, he's a freaking genius, but he was studying to get his real estate license when he was in like high school.
Mhm.
He passed all the courses and everything, but couldn't take the test because he wasn't 18. Took it when he
Mhm.
was 18, passed it the first time. I mean, the kid's a freaking just a smart kid. So now he's a real estate agent. And I remember him telling Titus one day, Titus was telling him, dude, why are you doing all this studies? Like, let's go to the gym, let's do this. And because he was a football player of mine, but he wasn't like as good as Titus. Titus was
Mhm. Mhm.
obviously, so, he had told Titus, he's like, well, I don't want to be like your dad and not have nothing when I'm older. And like Titus was so offended that he said that. And the kid Austin, like, I don't think he meant nothing by it. He's like, look at your dad. He works his ass off and he lives in an apartment. And then
Mhm.
Titus is like, yeah, but he's raising three fucking kids. He runs a wrestling company. He runs the football program. He's going to school to get his degree, his master's degree, and just naming off all the stuff that I was doing. And he was like, and Titus tells him, do you know how many people respect my dad, whether it's wrestling, football, or just in this community? And he kind of went off on the kid, and I was like, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't like that, but uh, you know, that's the kind of stuff that, like, you can't really put a price on for the lives you affect. And that kid Austin, like, to this day, he still messages me and we talk and stuff. And he's doing so great. He's like I said, he's selling $1 million homes now. But
Mhm.
it's just like the way people perceive you sometimes isn't the way you really are. Like I said, I don't have a lot of things in my life. I'm looking living with my mom right now because after COVID hit, I moved in here. And so, like, I'm not like I'm this rich baller and stuff like that. I'm getting rid of my debt right now. I'm trying to do things the right way this time. But
Sure.
I every time I go to a wrestling show and all these guys just run up and to just say hi to me. I tell the story and I don't like to mark out for myself, but went to watch Titus at Gorilla one time, Battle of Los Angeles. He's wrestling Daniel Garcia. So I've known Garcia for a while. Actually, like I'm one of his fucking biggest fans. And we were just sitting there talking, and all of a sudden I look over and some guy taps me on the shoulder, and I look over and it's fucking Darby Allin. And I'm like, hey, what's
Mm.
up, bro? And he's sitting there, and I hate to use the term marking out, but he's just putting over all the stuff I did in Oregon because he was a young wrestler or just a fan when I was wrestling over there. He's like, "Oh my god, man, I thought that was you." Blah blah blah. And he's just putting me over huge, and so we're just sitting there talking for about 30 minutes about me and the matches he saw. I remember when you did this. I remember when you worked this guy. And man, I binge watch Portland Uncut all the time, and just putting me over. And I'm like, dude, you're about to go to the Muda Bye Bye show and team with Sting and Muda, and you're telling me about me, but like I would have never known that he used to watch me when he was in Seattle and Portland area, and he was a fan of mine. And I kind of knew he knew me from Nick Wayne because Nick told me, but I hear him sitting there, guy's like one of the biggest stars in the world, and he's asking me about my career.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, so I don't have a lot of money stuff, but like that is more to me than any of this stuff, than
Mhm.
anything. Like I because for me, it's like I spent most of my adult life in the wrestling world. So for guys like that to give me credit and respect, that means a lot to me. When he didn't
Yeah.
have to, he doesn't have to
Yeah.
come say hi to me. When Johnny Morrison does a shoot interview and he mentions me as his trainer, like he doesn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Same with Timothy Thatcher when he mentions me on his these podcasts and stuff. How hey he's like boss is the greatest man I ever in my life and stuff like he doesn't have to do all that. But they do it because it's a respect thing. And so like if I don't have money, then the respect is way more than I could ever get in a payout. Like it means like for God's sakes, I went to Oasis Wrestling with Salem and they booked me in a death match, and they were so excited that I agreed to do it. Like they were like honored that I'm like this is like Jacob fought too, so
Yeah.
like you guys, and they were
Yeah.
just sitting there like just so fucking honored that I would consider working for them. And I was like, guys, of course I love you guys, of course I would. And we went on there and had a great match, and So I go to these shows and these guys just give me all this credit and respect. Like, man, it means a lot. You know, it just means a lot when
Yeah.
people look forward to seeing you and thank you for what stuff you've done. You know, and I always tell these people, like, you know, I somewhat have an ego, I guess, in wrestling, but like I don't usually put myself over because the boys do it for me. You know,
Yeah.
and when I say that, I don't mean to be egotistical, but I say it out of admiration for the guys because, you know, they don't have to say these things about me, and they do. They go out of their way, and it's not like I'm running a bunch of shows and they're saying it just to me to get them booked. You know, like they're all doing bigger
Yeah.
things than me. Like Chupi won't do an interview where he doesn't mention my name. You
Hmm.
know, Flacco, he won't do an interview where he doesn't mention something that I've done for him. You know, and
Hmm.
like that's the kind of stuff that, man, it just holds in my heart. You know, Paul Sador is the same way. You know, we're
Yeah.
just really good friends. He always mentions me and thanks me for stuff, you know, and it's like, you know, people like that, man, that just always give you credit, you know, and like I just can't say enough. When in my opinion, like they've done more for me, you know, like Paul's one of my
Yeah.
favorite guys to work. You know, I work Paul every day of the week. You know, I love working Paul. You know, but it's just like that's the kind of stuff, man, that you hold dear, you know, and you know, if and like even if I had money, like I would still appreciate that more. You know, not
Yeah.
really. I'm not saying I'm broke and I'm penniless, but I mean, it's like
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not living large either. You know.
but I can tell you, you know, this is something that I learned, and I'm just telling you this just because, you know, we've talked a lot about money, and I've had other people, like I just posted a podcast today that you know, I kind of went off on a listener who was like, oh, you know, how are you? You know, you're doing financially well, and I have been financially blessed. That's true, but you know, my whole life, I thought to myself, because my I said that before in the podcast. My parents, they always fought about drugs and money. That was
Mm,
it. That was all they ever fought about. I mean, it was always about. It was mostly about money. And so I just grew up thinking, well, if I did ever do drugs and I have all the money, there's not gonna be any problems.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And so yeah, like I went to law school. I worked my butt off, man. I you know, I am proud of the fact that I it took me about 9.5 years to get through school. And it was like full-time work, full I mean, you're doing it yourself, but it's like full-time school, full-time work, you know, raising kids, doing all that stuff. And then I working 60, 70 hours a week after that, and I got blessed well beyond my measure financially. But what was really interesting to me was as I was coming up, I remember thinking to myself, I was like, well, I had like all these things. I'm like, if I just buy the big house, then I'll be happy. And then I got the house. And then I was like, you know, I always wanted to have a movie theater in my house. So I built a movie theater, I put it in my house, and I was like, okay. But then I was like, if I had the nice car, that's the next thing. And then it was like, well, if I bought a pinball machine, like I started just thinking
Yeah.
of all these things. You know what though? Every single one of those things were cool for about a month, and then it was
Yeah.
on to the next thing. And I realized all of these things were trying to fill a hole that material things couldn't fill. And it
Yeah.
wasn't
Never.
until I started focusing it on experiences, taking my kids places, doing things with my children. I have more fun. You know, I look, I have a lot of cool stuff. I really do. But there's nothing more meaningful to me than grabbing one of my kids, getting them in the car, driving them somewhere, taking them out to eat, even if it's Taco Bell, and just
Yeah.
sitting them down and talking with them for an hour. And I learn more on the drive there and on the drive back about my kids
Mm,
than any other time. And
yeah.
that's, you know, I just took my oldest son and his friend to Next Level Pro on Saturday.
Mm,
And my son hasn't probably been to an indie show since one I ran, probably in 2019, you know?
yeah.
And just to sit there with him, you know, as a 16-year-old boy and watching this wrestling and having all these wrestlers come up to me and introduce themselves to me, talk about the podcast, talk about my wrestling, talk about the stuff, you know, that means so much more to me than the money. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And
Oh,
so that's why I say to you, like you know, people might talk like that guy, and I think you already know this. That kid might have said something like, "Well, I don't want to be like your dad and have nothing." You don't have nothing. You have
yeah.
a wealth of memories and people who love you that money can't buy. That guy could sell as many $1 million homes as he want. He'll never have that.
Yeah.
You know
No.
what I mean?
No, I definitely understand that. Like, uh, when I was heavily going with working and school and all that stuff, like I always made time to take the kids to do stuff. You know, like camping trips, fishing. We'd watch Super Bowl parties, WrestleMania parties, and all that. And uh, it's kind of bad. Like, I don't say bad now, but heartbreaking now that I don't get to do those things with him anymore.
Mm,
Bishop, I could still kind of, and we are supposed to go camping soon, but Titus is so busy doing this stuff. Like, we used to go fishing all the time. We don't do that anymore.
mm,
Salem's the same way. We used to go camping and fishing. We don't do that anymore because she's so busy. So those are the things that I miss a lot when I was able to do all those things with them because they live with me and we're just able to see them all the time. Now, like, if I'm not texting with Titus, I'll run into him at the gym because we work at the same gym. We'll talk for a little bit, and once in a while go to a show together. But he's traveling so much now; it's hard to hang out and do stuff with them. And same thing with Abigail; she's working, and then she's got her show she's doing out. And if I try to wrestle still, I got a show somewhere I got to do. So those are the things that I miss. But I'll always have in my heart those things with those fun times with them and with the people that I've met and that I still to this day give me credit. JR Kratos is another one who, no matter what he does, he always gives me credit for being in his life and helping him out. And I mean, I could run a list down of a bunch of people, but it's just so just means so much to me when people give me just a little bit of respect, and not just because they owe it to me, but because they don't have to give me respect and they just choose to.
mm,
That's what means a lot to me. And I'll always hold that high in any higher regard more than money. Because, like I said, when I got my settlement, I had a lot of fucking money, and I
mm.
still long for people fucking showing me the respect. And
Yeah.
and like I said, I have a lot of good friends in this business. A lot of people that I've met lately that are really cool. A lot of doing big things, and I have that certain circle that I've known for 20 plus years. That I know if anything happens, that they're on their way to come get me or come see me. And when
Mm,
I had just had that thing with my lungs that I was going on, man, like I had these wrestlers wanting to come drive down here just to see if I was okay and stuff. And man, it just like makes me tear up. That these guys are grown ass men doing big things and they want to check in on me to make sure I'm okay.
yeah.
It's just crazy. And even like small things, like when I say, like when it's my birthday and I'll have 300 people commenting on my page, happy birthday, boss, and blah, blah. It's just so amazing to me. It's just so amazing to me
Yeah.
that people just take, even if it's the second out of the day to say, hey, thanks, man. It's just,
Yeah.
that's why I'll always, not to like say I don't have a lot in my life because I do, but there's times where I just go back and look at some of the screenshots of people saying good things about me. I had a friend in Oregon who just passed away named Thunder, and I had screenshotted a post that he put up thanking me for when I was doing stuff at Portland Wrestling and how I got my shot there and for uncut and stuff. And I was just like, man, that's like for him to go out of his way and say that he didn't have to, but that's the kind
Yeah.
of stuff that I really hold dear, and that'll
Yeah.
always be my main reward for this business is for anything I do is people just show me the respect and thanking me.
Dude, and that's the thing, man. Like, it's funny. Well, you're talking about your kids in particular. It's hard, man. Like, it's so hard when kids start transitioning to adulthood and get busy. Like my
Mm-hmm.
son, I love my son to death. He's 16, almost 17 years old, and he's a senior in high school, and he's constantly running and trying to have the best senior year of his life, which I encourage. But it's
Yeah.
hard, man. It's hard when you don't have that little kid who wants to just go everywhere with you
Yeah.
anymore and hang out with you all the time, and it's
Yeah.
okay. Like he's at that spot where he doesn't really need me anymore. And
Yeah.
that's, I mean, he does, he needs me, but I mean, like, he's at the spot now where he's starting to become an independent adult,
Yeah.
and it's hard, but it's at the same time, you get proud of him,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's great. Let me ask you, I, want to wrap this up with you. So let me ask you a few questions that I ask everybody. What would you say is your number one success in life?
Um, probably being a father. I would say being a
Yeah.
father. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that's probably the most thing I'm successful as being a father.
Yeah. Well, your kids love you. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
And they followed in your footsteps. That says a lot. What would you say is your biggest failure in life, and what did you learn from it?
My biggest failure would probably be being too involved, like juggling too many things at once. Like I
Mm,
said, I was always working two jobs, weekends sometimes. I had my kids, going to college, running the whole football program in West Sac. I just did. I mean, I had so much stuff going on that I missed, like traveling and things like that, like things that I could have done. I'll never say that uh, I I picked being a father over having opportunities because that's just
mm,
not fair to my kids. but there was so much of my life was spent running my company and doing all these things that I could have moved down to Florida and maybe went to like Ohio Valley or something like that, and took those steps to do bigger things, and I just never did because SPW, my football program, my kids, all that was always more important than me trying to make it in the business as a star, and so I'll kind of always regret not taking that shot. But when I look at my kids and what they're doing, it's not even a afterthought. Like I just they weren't there. No career is worth losing that time with your kids. So
Yeah.
but it's somewhat of a regret for me to not take another step.
Yeah, but you know what? So here's something really interesting. I'll tell you this. I've done a lot of interviews with guys who have made it now. A couple WWE Hall of Famers, some that have already launched, and a couple that are coming. And there's one running theme that I hear from these guys. Like I'll point to Tito Santana, which has already been out there. And the one thing that he said, I asked him, I said, if you had to do it over again, would you do it again? And he said, no, I would have done something different. He's like,
Yeah.
because I missed so much time with my kids. I have a great relationship with them now, but I miss birthdays, Thanksgivings, Christmases, like all these things. And that's a running theme I'm hearing
Yeah.
in these things. And you put so much emphasis on being a father. Like you said, like you might have a little bit of regret, but I am, you may not be religious, but I am. And I think that things happen the way that they're supposed to. Like I'm the same way. There's sometimes I wonder, I was like, if I hadn't gone on that mission, or if I did come back on that mission and then went somewhere and trained and got finished when I was 21 and lifted weights and did some things. I mean, 6'7", 285. I
Yeah.
should have been able to make it somewhere. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
but then I would have missed all that time with my kids, and
Yeah.
I couldn't have lost that. So
No,
here's something I
I always tell
go
the
ahead.
story about Titus when he played football. His it was senior year, because he tore his ACL his junior year, and he had pretty much only played 2 games, and then he tore his ACL, and he was a phenomenal football player. So
Mhm.
we worked our ass off all year, and then that summer we just were in the gym. I mean, it was probably the hardest I've ever worked out in my life. Just me and him competing every day to see who would quit first. And he finally got cleared to play his senior year. And this was we had this group that he was with, that age group. I had coached them since they were in like sixth grade. Like I had moved with them all the way up, and then our plan was I'm going to coach them when they get to high school, because I was already coaching at the high school. And then when they go to varsity, I'm going to coach them up there, and it panned out that way. Like I was a JV head coach. The head coach got fired. I went up and I head coached varsity. So I was up there coaching with them. So everything planned out. He tore his ACL. The next year we worked our ass off. This is going to be the big year. Some colleges were still looking at him. Week 2, he was like second in the area in rushing. Fucking tore his ACL again. And
Oh,
and I remember, God, I hate getting emotional talking about these things. We're taking him off the field and we get him to the ER, and he's in the bed laying there and all this stuff. And then we go home, and he tells me, he's like, "Dad, I'm sorry." And I'm like, "For what?" I go, "It's just a game and blah blah this and that." And I'm thinking he's apologizing for getting hurt and not playing that game. And he's like, "Well, I'm sorry because I told you that when I made it to the NFL, you were never gonna have to work again a day in your life," because he knows how hard I worked, my jobs. And
mhm,
man, that just like it's like fucking a knife cutting out my heart, because here's this kid just lost everything, and he's
mhm,
sorry that he's not gonna be able to take care of me, you know, like he said he was, that, and it just like I'm just like, man, what kind of kid does that, and
yeah,
I know it's a reflection of how close we are and stuff, but for that kid to say that, dude, is just like, man, I'm sitting here, trying to hold it together for him, and he's worried about me. And to this day, that's how he is. That's how he is to this day. He says that all the time. Like, man, I can't wait till I get signed, and I'm gonna get you there too, and all this stuff. And I'm just like, dude, just worry about yourself, man. Like, I'll be fine. Like, just watching you succeed and watching Abigail succeed is like enough for me. Like my time is done
mhm,
in business. And but that's the way both those kids are. Like they just always, are so thankful for the stuff we've done together and the sacrifices that we've all made, and it's like I can't put any price on that, man. Like, the way those kids affect me and I affect them is just, it's crazy, man. It's just so fucking crazy. Like, man, I just, like I said, people don't understand it, like the stuff we've all been through together, and they just, man, I like I said, I just can't even put it into words, like the how much those kids mean to me. They're like
wow,
my everything.
yeah. That's beautiful, man. That's awesome. What a cool story. I got one last question for you. Um, you've talked a lot about eulogies that you've given. One day you're going to pass away and you're going to have a funeral, and I'm sure it's going to be well attended. What do you hope is the one thing that somebody says about you in your eulogy?
Probably there's some things I wish they don't. I hope they don't say, but probably just like that they're gonna remember me for uh, always being that guy that cared about the business and helped them out. And
Mhm.
just I've always tried to give people opportunities and make people better, whether that's working for me or going somewhere else and getting better. But I just hope that they just say that, here's a guy that generally helped me out and always looked out for me. You know,
Yeah.
I just, like I said, I try to not play politics. I try to treat everybody with respect. And I got so many my wrestling kids, whether it's Chupi, Von Airy, Hayashi, Timmy, Drake, Samurai, Scooter, just all these people that branch off from me that I just hope that they understand that we may not talk every day, but I don't love them any less. They're always going to be my
Hmm.
wrestling kids and my wrestling family. And
Yeah.
if they ever need anything, they can always call me and know that I'll be there to help them out as I know they will be there for me. You know.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. This is what I love about having a podcast. I mean, I have known you for what? I mean, that first, so 23 years, April
Yeah.
2000, and I don't think we've ever had a conversation like this before. And it's really
No.
great to get to know you and hear about your life, hear about some of the similarities and some of the differences. And I got to tell you, if I was going to put on Mount Rushmore together, you would definitely be on it. So,
Thank you, man. That means a
uh,
lot. A lot to me.
yeah, yeah. And, it's great, and I hope I hear you're going to hang it up soon, and I just got back into it. I'm hoping that match finally happens. Big Ugly versus. We'll see. We'll see if we get that going someday. But anyway, anyone who's been able to get through two old guys talking this long, I hope you subscribe. We got a lot more fun stuff coming up. Uh, Big Ugly, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to interview you, and I've known you for a long time, and I've got nothing but respect for you. I really do.
Thank you, man.
So,
And same to you, man. I've known you for a lot of years, and you're one of those few guys I actually enjoy talking to when I see them.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Well, we'll talk to you again soon.
All right, man. Thank you.